Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Chatting with Nuts. This is a monumental episode. This is episode 20, the big 20. And we're joined tonight by my guest, which is Angela from the Literature Science Alliance, which I love that name. And also, everyone, before I let her introduce herself, I do want to say this week was Angela's birthday. Happy birthday, Angela. I know I'm a few days late, but we're happy to have you and happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, it's not too bad because I'm born at like 11:30 p.m. on the 15th. So we're still within the 48-hour grace period. So
Okay, good. Because, I don't have you on Facebook, so that's the only way I ever remember anyone's birthday.
Yeah, I think my best friend only remembers my birthday because we're born 6 months apart exactly. That's the only way he knows like the day and the month. So, but yeah. No, and I'm glad you like the channel name. I didn't think of it when I wanted to make booktube. I asked my friends like, what should the channel name be? And my one friend loves like alliteration-y type things. But it's one of those things, like, I'm sure authors feel this after they make book titles where it's like, oh, this is harder to say than I thought it would be.
It is funny because I was like practicing saying your channel name today. I'm like, literature sci. It's just there's only so many syllables that I can string together with my brain damage, and that just is almost at the threshold.
Well, and some people say literary science lines, which I'm fine with. Like, it doesn't really matter, but it was one of those things where when I used to pretend I would do an intro for my videos, I'd be like, hi, welcome to Literature Science Alliance. And now I can say it. But back then, I was just trying to learn how to film and I couldn't say my own channel name. And I'm like, we're just going to jump into the video and move on.
As someone who my entire career has been based off just like naming something and moving on, and like in wrestling my name was Jimmy Nuts. I never really thought about the impact that would have, and I became Jimmy Nuts, and it was like, man, I probably could have picked something a little bit better. Like, it worked, it was fine, it all worked out, but like that in a fantasy network, really, like a play on network, like why did I do that? But you do these things and you don't expect them to succeed. At least I didn't.
I mean, I did make the name with the intention, and I want to get back to it once I'm done with my thesis and real life problems. Is I knew I would want to do a specific set of videos where I did science and magic systems, because a lot of my favorite magic systems and worlds do have their grounding in science, specifically like the Cosmere and his dark materials and a whole bunch of stuff. So I knew I would want to do these videos that everyone could consume, and I do have a few, and they're okay, but I want to do something different, and it requires learning a new skill, and learning new things right now is not where my brain's at. But that was also part of the channel name, is like, I knew that would be a thing I would want to bring to BookTube that was like niche me.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool to see that you do have some science videos up on your channel. And also you're talking about the intro. I love your intro.
That was also made by the same friend who came up with my channel name. All of my channel art is my friend. Her stuff's in all my descriptions. Her name's Alyssa Starrett, and she's so cool. She's actually went back to get a bachelor's in art for specifically science. So works at the Natural History Museum in Cleveland now as an intern and hoping to maybe get a job there. And just opened up her first exhibit. I'm blown away by what she can do. She made that animation in like 15 minutes.
It's so good. I love the intro to your videos. It's consistent. It's not too long. I used to have an intro, and then I just stopped because I was just like, I don't think anyone likes my intro. I mean, I had a friend who made it and I like it, but you can see when people like drop off your video. I would just see in that first 30 seconds, just, and then they would skip or whatever. So I dropped mine, but I love yours. I think it's really engaging and really high quality.
Well, I think it's nice. I mean, for me, I think, I don't see a huge drop off. I mean, I think everyone sees like the initial, like someone clicked but didn't stay, but it's 10 seconds. So I think that's good. When you get longer than 10 seconds, I think, unless it's like super catchy, it's an issue. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if he's going to like Mask of Mirrors. I haven't quite figured out fantasy, but for sure, Ted Chiang. Yes.
Yeah, and for all the audio only listeners, Angela is a big fan of Mask of Mirrors and Ted. Is it Chiang? Is that how you say it?
It's Chiang, actually.
Chiang. Okay.
That's what I've looked it up, and from what I can tell, it's pronounced like the I's not there.
Okay, cool. So Fantasy Babble's asking Angela to convince me to read these. Ted Chiang, I've already actually, Fantasy Babble, you're the one that convinced me that I need to read that. It's been on the TBR. Mask of Mirrors is something I didn't realize you love so much. It actually won your book of the year this year, right?
Yeah, and here's my second one. I was reading it before talking with you. It's the sequel. I don't know. There's something really cozy about it because, well, it's interesting. Fantasy Babble brought up a sci-fi and a fantasy because I read those genres for very different reasons. For some reason, even though they are in my head, they actually can be like of the same genre. They're very, they're speculative. You're meant to explore the human experience without boundaries and things like that. But sci-fi, I like to think more, and fantasy, I like to escape. And
That's
so
it.
The Mask of Mirrors was like my perfect escape book. It's just fun. It's just fun political drama and like characters that I fell in love with. Whereas like Exhalation by Ted Chiang is just story after story of thought-provoking, problem-solving things that I love.
Well, Erickson said that he stopped reading the fantasy genre a while back, and he prefers science fiction because he believes science fiction is about ideas, and he likes that. And I can see that. I think that's a valid thing to say. Though I do think there are fantasy that have definitely had ideas.
No, yeah, and
such.
these are all generalizations,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like I
yeah.
also read sci-fi for like the fun space opera adventures, or like right now
Certainly.
I have an indie series that's really fun. That's just like you've got a trader character, you've got like a bounty hunter, like very. I mean, I guess Star Wars. Everyone argues if it's fantasy or whatever, but there's definitely escapism to be had there. I think it's just since I entered book escapism through fantasy, that's where my nostalgia bone is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And George R. R. Martin says this. He said that he believes horror, science fiction, and fantasy are all residents of the same house. And I love that because I'm reading A Storm of Swords right now, reread for the billionth time. And it is so obvious that George R. R. Martin loves meshing horror with his fantasy. And I kind of agree, like you said, like you like to read both and you kind of feel like they kind of ebb and flow with each other. So I like that analogy of them all being in the same house.
No, I mean, I think in the houses, if it has a name, it's speculative. And I have to use that word more and more as I read different authors who just say, I don't care what genre I'm in. This is what I need. These are the elements I require to tell this story. And that happens a lot with African-American authors, African authors, like from the African continent, happens with Caribbean authors. Like, they're just
Certainly.
like, I don't care about what you guys think fantasy or sci-fi looks like. I'm just doing stuff, and I really love it.
Yeah, and I see that conversation happen a lot around many different works, right? I saw people discussing this about the Dark Tower series the other day by Stephen King. People are like, he kind of mixes all the genres together. And I'm like, I just call it all fantasy, but I guess we could also just call it all fiction. And I get a little bit out of shape. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I get a little defensive. I go to Barnes & Noble. I'll walk around with my wife and I'll see like Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo in fiction, not fantasy. And it's like, oh, was it too good to be in the fantasy section, Barnes & Noble?
It happens with Erin Morgenstern more often too, which bothers me a lot because I read The Starless Sea and it was up for like a fantasy award, and she'll never get shelved in fantasy. She's too popular for us.
It is interesting that some authors end up kind of like they leave the fantasy genre, and people will even spruce it up a little bit with speculative fiction as the title. I don't necessarily care. It doesn't bother me.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm actually not a marketing expert, so I don't know how to make a book find its right audience, and obviously somebody else does. But it's all marketing tools.
It sure is. I think that for me, it's one of those things where those conversations about what is what have become a whole lot less interesting as I've read more. And I just realized that I just like reading, and I just like reading really out there stuff. Han says, Angela, if you convince Jimmy to read the Greenbone Saga, your work on the podcast will be done. One of my bullet points for this episode actually is, Angela, sell me on this Greenbone Saga nonsense I keep hearing about. What I understand it's a family. I understand that there's a lot of grayness to it. I've heard that there's some martial arts. I think Fonda Lee actually practices jiu-jitsu, which I do too. So that's really cool.
Yeah, Fonda Lee has experience with martial arts. I don't actually know off the top of my head the specific one. So you're probably right, but I can't confirm or deny.
Oh, don't ever go with me being right. I'm usually wrong. But
so it's weird because this happened like halfway through the year. I realized because I had read both live ships earlier this year, and then started my reread of Greenbone in anticipation of Jade Legacy. And I did this video recommending books to my friends. And one of my friends who I knew loved Jade City and Jade War, I was like, you should read Ship of Magic. I think you would really love it because it's about a really like privileged family struggling with interfamily ties and also the issues of the world and the global changes in the world. But at its heart, it's about these different family members and how they maneuver their space, how they maneuver where they want to be. And so although like Robin Hobb has a very different writing style to Fonda Lee, I think Fonda Lee is more modern, straightforward writing style. Although people swear by her action scenes. I don't visualize when I read, so
Hey, me either.
I can't speak to the quality of the action scenes. They didn't bore me, which is normally what happens to me in an action scene. Yeah. And sometimes I could kind of tell what hand was where with certain, like, you know, dagger motions, but like people swear by those things. But it's really a slow-paced family drama that I really, like I say for Live Ship, want a mini series of. And I think Greenbone, not Live Ship, does have one in the works, because it's just like you're lulled into these false sense of securities where you have all these machinations in the background, and then it very is a Song of Ice and Fire where you're just like, oh my goodness, this big thing happened, and it's perfect. It doesn't feel convenient. I don't like what this character did, but it's completely true to who they are. Like, if you love studying Kennet from Live Ship Traders, let me introduce you to Hilo, because
oh yeah.
So in terms of like people who can make characters who aren't just morally gray, they're grounded in their belief systems and what they've been through in life. I haven't met a modern author do it as well as Robin Hood. Like,
I mean, I think Kennet is the best antagonist of all time.
Yeah, no, well, then when with Hilo, it's questionable whether you call him an antagonist. Actually, Fonda Lee pushes back against the idea that he's a morally gray character. He is morally right in his mind and in his culture, because this is not a very westernized culture. It's based on, you know, other things. But like, he'll do stuff and think certain ways. And in the moment, I'm like nodding my head. I'm like agreeing with him. I'm like, oh yeah. And then after the fact, I think of what he actually just did. And I'm like, that's horrible. That is not okay. So it's really intense. And all the characters are like that. And she covers in that trilogy, I think 25 or 30 years. You're meant to follow this one generation. Yeah, the scope of it is huge. The first book's very contained, so you can read it, be satisfied, and decide if the writing style is for you. And the next two books really expand on it, because she sets up a messy situation, and she's not like a typical fantasy author who's like, I can solve this in like 3 years in book time. It takes 25 years. So I don't know. It's masterful. It's one of those books that, like, I'm glad it's getting buzz in some of the very large booktube channels, because I think it deserves to be picked up by so many people.
Yeah, I mean, I've been swept up in the hype a little bit, you know, hearing everyone how much they're loving it and praising it. And I've even seen some people kind of cross their arms at Jade Legacy, the third book that just came out. And they were kind of like, if it could be better than Jade War. And then they're like, yeah, Jade War, it is better than Jade War, which is pretty incredible, because that book was just so highly received. It sounds like something I would very much enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I will say also, I am one of the people, the only people on the internet, really, I swear, who doesn't love Jade War. I love Jade City and I love Jade Legacy, and I like Jade War. I think Jade War for me was a middle book. Because I mean, I think everyone was yelling about it, and I expected, it's called Jade War, so I expected this action-packed, high-stakes, fast-paced thing. And it's high stakes, but it's not action-packed. It's more like explosive, but it takes place over like 5 years, and I wasn't prepared for that.
Right. I mean, that's good to have those kind of expectations tempered, especially if book one was following events closely and then there's like a time jump and those kind of things. So
book one was more your standard, here's a year in a book, which I feel like we're all trained to from all of the school year stories we read growing up. And this took place over a year.
Yeah. Seems like Nexus Zen agrees with you actually about Jade War. So you might not be the only one on the internet.
Well, at least it's one of those things where it's one of the only books where the hype got me. Most of the time I agree with the hype or I don't believe the hype, but I expected, because Jade City, you know, this happens with books sometimes. You read, I got it from the library because I get most of my stuff from the library. I was reading the first couple chapters and I'm like, I like this writing. These characters are great. And I just bought the first two in hardback. And so like it was an instant connect for me. And so I was just disappointed with how I wasn't connecting as much with Jade War, even though there wasn't technically anything wrong with it. And in hindsight, knowing where everything goes, I'm like, oh, that's why all of these things happened. And she's obviously an author that plans, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you're seeing a lot of authors like take it to the next level when it comes to like plotting and thinking things out. Like Sanderson's extremely good at plotting, in my opinion, as far as like twists, turns, and connecting those. I call them like shoestrings are laying all over the floor, and like how are they all connected? And they're Tad Williams is actually really good at this when you take a look back, more of a classical approach to it. But I think that he is also a really, really good example of this. I didn't know you were such a huge Sanderson fan. I had no idea, because me and you collabed on a Robin Hobb video. We kind of talked about that. But looking at your channel and watching your videos, and I was looking at like your top books of all time, and that whole top row
Yeah.
was Sanderson. So when did that infatuation begin?
So yeah, it's not something I get to talk about a lot because my Sanderson videos don't actually perform well, so I'm not
Which
given a
is
lot of incentive to
strange.
do them.
That's strange.
Well, most people find my channel, I think, because they want recommendations they don't hear about all the time.
Yes.
And they want like someone who has read stuff like them but hears new things. Because I started Sanderson in 2005. I was probably late middle school. And my stepdad was courting my mom at the time. He'd been a family friend forever, and he had Elantris in the backseat of his car picking us up from the airport. I read the prologue, which if you've read the Elantris prologue is Chef's Kiss. And I took the book and then I read it. And I think high school, I read the Mistborn trilogy. End of high school was when Way of Kings came out, and I read that. I've been reading everything every time it came out. My copy of Warbreaker has the sci-fi logo on it, like the old sci-fi logo. Because I guess the Sci-Fi Channel sponsored that book or something. Because Warbreaker is one of the few that isn't Tor, because he actually published it for free.
Free on his website, right?
Yeah. So I've been reading them since they came out, and they were my entryway into adult fantasy, and I've never looked back. I loved how I loved and hated when he got to finish Wheel of Time, because my logical side was like, good, he can write whatever he wants for the rest of his life, because at that time he wasn't mega popular. He was very popular, but he wasn't he couldn't write his own ticket anywhere, right?
Right.
And then I knew finishing Wheel of Time, he would have a bunch of money, could do whatever he wanted, but then I knew I wouldn't get Words of Radiance, which if you've read the end of Way of Kings, imagine waiting 4 years.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, but I really do love Sanderson books. I get why they're not for everyone, but like for me, like I love simple writing styles and I love epic world building, and a lot of his characters I resonate with, especially on rereads. So yeah, I probably have read most Sanderson books except for Mistborn Era 2 like 3 or 4 times.
Wow. It's not very often that you see a Sanderson fan that began way back when. So that's actually a pretty unique origin story, I think, for getting into the Cosmere and getting into Brandon's writing.
Yeah, no, it was by accident. He wasn't very popular back then.
Like, how did you stumble across? You just saw the cover and was like, "Oh, this looks good."
It was in the backseat of the car. I've been reading ever since I could read, and so I always read anything that was around me. I was just bored. I had a cell phone, but I didn't have texting, and it was like a flip phone, right? So it wasn't like I was on my phone. So there was a book next to me, and I picked it up, and I did like the cover. And it was mostly the prologue, the idea of this city that was great, that crumbled. I was like, oh, what's happening? So
I have not read Elantris, but I'm always very interested by cities or civilizations that crumble. Like that is something that I'm very interested in. Whenever I think about writing, that is like always something that's at the forefront of my head, is like something falling from grace and then the impact of that. I think it's why I'm like a really big fan of book 4 and 5 of A Song of Ice and Fire, because it's very much the remnants of what's left after this not a cataclysmic event, but like certainly socially would probably be considered that. And I think that like a lot of people don't like that, but it's exploring like the fallout of something like that. And I think it's like one of my favorite things. So maybe Elantris will be up my alley.
Maybe. I mean, it's one of those things where it's hard, where like I want people to experience Sanderson in publication order, but I understand that not everyone can. Like it's just like it's not like a hype train. And Elantris is the most different for multiple reasons. Not only that it's his first, so its dialogue is not as tight and it's not technically as well crafted, but it's also not action packed, and the magic system is much more subtle. It's really cool. But it's not like Allomancy, where everyone knows about it, even if they haven't read Mistborn. They're like, oh, it's the one with the medals, and it's like your Magneto, like that one is very like visual. And then like Stormlight Archive, like it has really cool magic that we still don't really understand, but it's really tied to physics. And this one it's more subtle, and it's more about, I don't know, you would probably actually like the one character everyone hates. I like the character. There's 3 point of views.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, it's more because he's more philosophical, and like everyone who reads it is like, oh my God, he's so boring. Why is he thinking so much? And it's like, because he's trying to figure out his shit.
Well, I mean, I like Erickson, so I'm all in, soldiers or anybody having philosophical ideas. And I actually, that's like I can see people complaining about that, because some people complain about Erickson, or like everybody in his books are so philosophical. But he responded to that in a interview once, and what he said is like when he was on a dig site, he talked to like some like person in the town, a very general person, probably not from a lot of money, and that guy was one of the most inspiring people he had ever talked to, or something like along the lines of like that guy had a lot of ideas about why we were here, and all kind of philosophical ideas. And it's not that you have to be at a certain level to have these ideas. I mean, we ponder ourselves in the universe constantly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a phenomenal defense. And I think that it shows that Erickson actually understands the common man a lot better than most other people that write about those things. And so maybe the Elantris character would be a hit for me then, because
and it looks like someone does like him. And I mean, when I first read this as like a 13-year-old, Harathan was fine. He was fine, but I cared more about the other two, who are more traditional protagonists to follow. But on rereads, he's always grown on me. And
that's
it's
awesome.
Just really interesting.
Alan says, ahoy. Alan, I just wanted to let you know that prior to the show, me and Angela were talking about how you're the very best person to do buddy reads with, solely for the fact that we know there will be no way that you could ever finish the book before us, because you just posted your October wrap up. It's December 17th. And it's nice because there's no pressure when you do a read along with Alan, because you never know when he's going to read it. So
it's really a low pressure situation, which is what I need in all of my buddy reads, which thankfully most of the people I buddy read with, like, it's chill. I was like, the hardest part of booktube is when you first get into it, you want to read the books with all the people, and finding the balance of how many books and how you want to buddy read. And stuff like
certainly.
That.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. Actually, when I first joined booktube, I had no interest in reading with other people. I had a list and I was checking it twice and figuring out which books were naughty and nice. Festive. Actually, real quick, before I continue on, we're talking about rereads and buddy reads and stuff. The A Song of Ice and Fire reread, the people who are following along with that, if you're listening to this, January 29th at 9 p.m. Eastern, Leanna and Alex will be joining me here on the channel. We're going to be continuing that. We're going to be doing A Storm of Swords, which is my favorite book of all time. So that is kind of the unofficial announcement of that. And I'll update it on the community tab as well. And that's going to be a lot of fun.
Nice.
But yeah, the buddy read thing. It's interesting. I think this is the first time I had like a real official buddy read, like where we made videos. I wouldn't say Shadows of the God count whenever I did that on Philip's channel, because like I was reading it anyway and it just happened to work out. And then the John Gwynn stuff that I did with them, I had actually read those books a year ago, so I was just going off memory. I've always kind of stayed away from buddy reads for some reason, but as I've done this A Song of Ice and Fire one, and as I did do War of the Flowers with Chris Bookish Calder and Andy Smith, that was fun as well. But now I'm feeling like I want to do that a little bit more, but there is that weird pressure of like, if you commit to something that I feel like I have to do it. Like I'm one of those people, like I don't like to back up from plans. And I will say reading Malazan and A Song of Ice and Fire in the same time, not the best decision I've ever made.
That's a choice.
Leanna hit me up and she's like, you want to do like a reread? And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, I'll just put off Malazan to 2022. And then it hit like July or August. And I was like, I'm going to read Gardens of the Moon. I probably won't even like it.
That's funny.
I was wrong. I told you, I'm always wrong. I'm never right. Oh, what's up, Ryan? Yeah. So buddy reading is an interesting thing. I think I'm a little bit more intrigued by it now that I've gotten a lot of the ones I really wanted to get out of the way. Like I've read a lot of stuff this year. What about you? Is this one of your better reading years, or is this?
I mean, the last 2 years have been weird because grad school is when I really started reading a lot again. I would say that like I've always been reading. So even in college, I read the Divergent series and Hunger Games, A Song of Ice and Fire, Stormlight Archive, and Name of the Wind and Wise Man's Fear. I think that's about what I read throughout 4 years of college, which is not like a little.
Those are good
but
ones.
Like it's, that's sometimes one person's year on booktube, right? Like it's a little different.
Right.
And then when I went to grad school, I have to take the T into work. So I live in Boston, and the T is this lovely train that is sometimes above ground and sometimes below ground. And it takes like 50 minutes to get anywhere in Boston. So I had like about an hour and a half to read every day, at least, if my stomach didn't get upset. So I got into reading, and each year I read more and more. So my first year was like 29 books, and it was like 45 books. And then it was like 70 some books. And now I'm solidly like at 120, 125 a year, which is ridiculous. I didn't think I could sustain it this year because I was more social this year than I was last year, because last year, is a black hole.
What's being social like?
Board games, like doing things with people where I can't read, like playing board games, like generally just going out.
This is my social life. This is every 2 weeks I become social. Other than that, I kind of just sit on my laptop and work. But
yeah, but I think this year's stronger for me than last year, because last year at the start of the year, I fell into this thing where I wanted to read these books that were nominated for the BookTube SFF Awards, which aren't a thing anymore. So I wanted to read all the things because I wanted to know, because I'd been kind of behind on things and I just wanted to know. And I just didn't like much of those books. Just didn't like them. Oh, thank you.
Darren, thanks for the 5 spice. Says, yes, just subscribe to Angela's channel. Glad to see you're chatting. Yeah, if you're not subscribed to Angela's channel, like, no one on BookTube reads the variety that she does and brings the quality of discussion and reviews. So definitely go check out Angela's channel. Make sure to hit subscribe. Darren, thanks for the 5 spot, man.
Well, I think that's what happened. So like my first 3 to 6 months, I think it was around 3 months, I checked in on my stats, and I'd always been, even before BookTube, been kind of like, I've read a lot of popular mainstream fantasy. Like at that point, I'd read the Lightbringer series. I'd read all of Sanderson. I'd read A Song of Ice and Fire. I'd read stuff I didn't even like that was popular. I read whatever Reddit told me to read because that was the only place I knew about books on the internet. And then I was like, I'm Venezuelan. And I was like, I want a book that's in South America by a South American author. And that does not exist. There's one. It's called The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina, and it's contemporary, and most of it's set in the United States. She's Ecuadorian, so you have that. But there's one. Okay. Correction. Silvia Moreno Garcia does Central America. She does that very well for Mexico. But I just wanted a South American story. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't really exist. And so that got me being like, well, what is out there? So that's when I discovered Jemison and stuff. And then come BookTube, I had followed a lot of channels that had great recommendations. And I didn't like my stats in my first 3 months. I read like 2 authors of color, and I was bored with what I was reading, and I wasn't having fun. And when I switched to actively being like, I want to read 50 to 60% authors of color total, I've been having a blast. It's been amazing. I don't have to track it anymore. I naturally am pulling from everywhere because I still read popular stuff. Like I'm reading Wheel of Time and Malazan. I like Malazan. Wheel of Time is a chore. But like it's been nice to be able to balance classic backlist popular and like finding new authors. And this year has been really fun. Like, I've been lucky that YouTube's sort of pushing my best fantasy video. It usually doesn't push anything of mine. It's usually just, I'm a slow growth channel. But that's a video I had a lot of fun filming because I loved every book on that list. And I was just like, oh, this was such a good year. I had so much fun.
Yeah, this year has been, it's been phenomenal. I'm a little stressed about making so I did year-end awards last year. I'm going to do them again, because I like doing that. And I don't do like top list very often on my channel, mainly because I read so much and I want to get reviews out and whatnot. So it's like the one time a year where I really do just get to sit down and go, well, what is the top, right? Like what is the best of what, and what was the best non-fantasy thing I read and all this stuff. I really am looking forward to that. But it's a competitive year for me because my first book, because the Goodreads thing came up and I looked at it. And it was like, the first book you reviewed was Stone of Farewell by Tad Williams. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was. And Green Angel Tower is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. That was the second book I read in 2021. And I would have told you in January, oh, that's going to win Book of the Year. It isn't. It's not going to win Book of the Year.
What is going to win? You should just tell us all right now.
I mean, how about this? I'm not going to say, because of course I want you all to watch the video, but it should be obvious if you've been watching my channel all year, what's going to win. I think the more interesting slots are going to be 5 through 2. I think that those will be interesting. And then the actual like standout awards, like last year I had best ongoing series that I read, which was Stormlight Archive, because it's excellent. Right. But I've read 50,000 pages this year, Goodreads tells me. And I'm not as impressive as you. I only have 88 books read.
That's about how many pages I have. Some of mine are very short. You've been reading Malazan.
Yes, my longest book was The Bone Hunters at 1,200 pages. The shortest book was 112 pages, though I think I don't know if A Storm of Swords is going to count for a reread, if it might eclipse The Bone Hunters, but my average book length was 566 pages, and I thought it'd actually be a little higher, but I guess I did read a lot of standalones this year.
Well, it also depends on like which copy you're using, right? And like for me,
Yeah.
I have a different spreadsheet because I don't know how many audiobooks you consume, but I have it kind of
Good
separated
amount.
physical pages versus audio, mainly because I don't read that many audiobooks. And I'm trying to figure out how much time do I actually have to sit down and physically read. It's more to help me plan. It's not like a goal to achieve anything. I just more want to know in a month how many hours do I actually spend down physically staring at a book, so I can try and plan TBRs that don't break my brain. Oh, is it going to be Robin Hobb? Huh.
Yeah, I happen to be a slight fan of Robin Hobb, just a little bit.
I'm going to read Fool's Errand soon, I promise.
Oh man, I'll be here when you do. I'd love to hear your reactions for that. I can't say anything else. It's awesome. I really, really like it. It's funny. I try to hit 100 pages a day, depending on how big the book is. And I took the pages and I still have 3 books to read this year that I'll finish before the first. And, but if you take like 50,000 flat and divided by 365, it's like 132 pages a day. And I'm like, oh, so I'm actually reading like on average over my goal. So like, as long as that number is like right around 100 pages, which pages is silly. It should be word count.
But no one ever really publishes their word count. Some authors do, some don't.
I wish they would. Because sometimes I'll pick up a book that is as skinny as like a Discworld book, and it's double the words or something. And I'm like, how? And I look and the font is just millimeter.
Well, and then it's even with word count, right? Sometimes it's just different. Like the same word count between Erickson and let's say Sarah J. Maas. That's a very different density of sentence structure.
Sure
okay,
is.
Right? Like I don't think I can go more extreme than that. But like an 800-page Sarah J. Maas book does not read the same as even a 400 pages of Erickson. Like I spend a lot of time staring at Erickson pages. Like,
yeah, I mean, Erickson is someone that I well, you know what though? So you're in Midnight Tides, right?
Yeah, I read the first 200 some pages of the ebook.
Okay, so I felt like when I got to Midnight Tides, I like started to get it, and I was able to read Midnight Tides faster than any other Malazan book I read, besides
I think it's written more like classic fantasy. I'm liking it a lot, but I think because it's written differently.
Yeah, and I think House of Chains is the beginning of that kind of change in some ways because of the one POV, that we
I think sort of. So like I liked the first part with Karsa and the first part of House of Chains because you're like yeah, I liked that. And then I like when we were getting near the end of it, it's like, oh, I know where we are. Like I actually know locations and things that happen. And I know what timeline I'm in and I caught this. But then the rest of House of Chains happens and like, oh, there's a lot of stuff I don't know.
Yeah, it's a wild book. For some reason, I'm telling you, like House of Chains, it started Midnight Tides. I hit a groove, and now like I read the Bone Hunters very quickly. Like it wasn't taking as long to process. The one author I always say that I can't read a lot of all at once, and it's funny because he's one of my favorites, is Tad Williams. Tad Williams is very descriptive. It feels like you're inside of his world, but he is not someone I could even read 100 pages of a day. Like it has to be like 40 to 50, and then I got to sit on it and just kind of like let it marinate a little bit. Especially when you're not a visual reader, like you aren't and I'm not. I will say Tad is one of the only authors that has ever got me to start actually imagining things. So like that is for me is a huge compliment because I'm not a visual reader. It's very much like shadows on a wall.
Yeah, mine is more like the way I describe it is sometimes I can have like colors or brightness, like you said, like shadows, but most of the time authors that really get me, it's like they describe feelings and smells and tastes and touch. And then I have like emotional visualizations. If
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just is. I never knew it was different than other people, so I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
I knew because when I started saying that on the show, I had some people be like, "Well, how do you read that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just read."
It's one of those things that makes you realize, like, if you ask a blind person how they exist in the world, that just doesn't make sense because obviously people adjust and they experience the world. Like you still are experiencing it.
Yeah, and it's just in a different way. I do wonder if that is indicative of what type of books I enjoy, what kind of prose I enjoy. Like I imagine that impacts a lot of what I read because I do tend to kind of lean towards, I would say I like boring books. I think I do happen to like more methodical books with, I'm not going to say I always love pretty prose, but smooth, well thought out prose that has like a rhythm to it. Not so much like a meter and a rhyme, right? But like rhythm.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I don't think it necessarily affects what I read because I think I still read a lot of action-packed stuff. But I think it depends on then, are they concise with their action scenes, or do they get to the point for those things? Or like I reread Mistborn this year because Alan was reading it for the first time, and I was like, oh, I really want to read it because it's been forever. And so while I was reading it, I was like, for once, because I'd been practicing since I've been reading all of these other books all the time, I'm like, oh, I can actually see this building he's describing a little bit better than when I first read it. Like there was some improvement.
Yeah,
aphantasia, I think, is what it is. But like, I think it's like everything. It's a spectrum. Some people have it worse than others.
Yeah, and I don't have trouble visualizing people. I don't know. It's weird.
It's different.
Tail Chasers, sung by Tad Williams. Cats and Adventure made me impulse buy. Yeah, I want to read Tail Chasers really badly. It's going to be one of those things like on a random whim when I have a spot randomly open in a month. I'm just going to like read all of that.
One day someone will convince me to read a Tad Williams, but my next backlist author is Michael Sullivan. That's someone I'm really curious about.
Yeah, that's one I'm also curious about because he seems like he's really active. And it also he seems like a really nice guy. I want to read it, but I never feel like I hear anyone like put him over the moon. Do you know what I'm saying? What
I want to read, and I think I'm going to get this in the first book, Theft of Swords. I mean, I'm mostly just curious because he has so many books out in this world. And I'm just like, well, am I going to like how you write? Because then I'll just love being in your world forever. Yeah. But I think in Theft of Swords, he has like these two bros that just are doing stuff together, and it's like the best friendship ever. And I'm like, I grew up on Xena Warrior Princess. I'm down for two friends going on adventures. Like I actually want a book like that. So we'll see.
What's interesting you say that, because I know Alan mentioned that as well, but Alan said this. He has actually had people kind of temper that expectation, and that some people feel like that it's overstated of the duo. And I'm like, then what is it? I'm so confused.
I'm going to try it. We'll see. I mean, for me, it's going to come down to, I mean, this is me in every fantasy book. This isn't just going to be this one, but do I care about the characters? And that has to do with how they're portrayed. And like, I can't know that. It's like dating. Everything could be done perfectly, but there's an X factor. And if that X factor is not achieved, I won't love the book. And I can't tell an author what that X factor is. It just is. Like,
do you have a feeling of what is a 5-star book for you? Like, what's the recipe?
No, there's no recipe.
It's a family secret. Got it.
Well, there's a couple. Oh, well, so I have learned. Well, I never thought about it, but it's pretty obvious my whole life. Endings matter a lot to me.
Oh, okay.
Endings matter a lot. If you give me like 95% of an amazing book, but you like stumble on the ending, automatically it goes down like a half or a full star. Like it leaves a weird taste in my mouth if it's not a good ending.
Okay.
I don't know why. I mean, I wish I could be someone who's like, it's the journey. Like, I mean, I've read Stormlight Archive. I've read Way of Kings 4 times. You'd think I'd know it's the journey, not the destination. But
that's funny coming from the guy who plans out Sander Lanches and such and has such epic endings. It's kind of funny that he's the journey before destination guy when I feel like that's not necessarily, I mean, it is true for his books because it's true for every book, but
yeah, no. So, I mean, I think if you can but then in reverse, you give me like a 3 to 4 star book for the first 50, 60%, but then you nail like the ending, then I love it. And I think it's not dissimilar to like watching gymnastics, where if someone does like an okay tumble in the sky or spin or whatever, but they stick it, they don't hop or anything, that's really impressive. Versus if they do something impressive in the air, that's still cool. But if they fell at the end, I mean, it's not amazing.
Yeah, that's actually so you're saying a good ending can save a bad book for you otherwise.
Well, not a bad book, but it can definitely increase a book's rating by a star, or if it's a good enough ending, it reframes everything that I had issues with, right? Like some endings, if I had a nitpick or I was upset about something consistently, an ending can reframe it, and then I'm like, oh wait, so that was super intentional, and I appreciate the intentionality there, and now I see things in a different light. So.
Yeah, I think that I've definitely had books that have done that. I am certainly someone who can deal with a lukewarm to bad ending, depending on how bad it is. And it depends on why it's bad, right? And I didn't know I was really like this until I started looking on the internet about my opinions on works. And then I started to realize that, oh, I guess I am not as impacted by endings as a lot of other people. One of the things happens to be like TV shows, right? Now, this opinion has changed over time, but when The Sopranos ending for that series initially aired, people were furious. They said it was awful, garbage ending. I never knew that. I just watched the series, after the fact, and I loved it. I absolutely adored it. And then I went online and I realized it's such a polarizing. And I would say now it's favored pretty heavily. But at the time it was not considered. Dark Tower is another series. A lot of people say, oh, the ending's terrible. I love the ending of Dark Tower. I actually had other issues with book 7, which I did a live stream with Sarah Reeds and Baron, Your Brain on Books, which was a lot of fun. And we kind of talked about like my gripes, but like I thought the ending was excellent. I thought it thematically fit. And I think that's where endings have to stick for me, is if it feels true to the work. Like it can be rushed, it can be anticlimactic, but if thematically it doesn't fit into the rest of the work, that's where I have an issue. And that is why I have avoided Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. I know a little bit of what happens, and people, you would think, well, if you don't care about bad endings, why wouldn't you go experience it? I've heard it has, but I've heard that thematically he kind of just crapped on everything that he had built in some ways, and that would bother me a lot.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have as strong of opinions as other people. I like the Lightbringer series. I'm going to reread it one day because it's a really fun time. Like I have a lot of fun reading it, and it's definitely a series that, because of its narrative framing and twists, is fun on rereads, because you're like, well, I know this thing now that was introduced this book, and there are things introduced even in the 4th book that you're like, what? I thought we had all the twists. I thought I knew what I was consuming.
Yeah.
But I will say the 5th book's not my favorite. It wasn't horrible. It just, the thing that bothered me is I think a thing that didn't bother other people. And the thing that bothered other people, I'm just like, oh, whatever, I don't care. Like,
yeah, and that's a good point though. Is sometimes the thing that people get up in arms about, I don't necessarily care. And I'll say this: I know everybody hates Game of Thrones season 8, but I found that my complaints about season 8 were much different than other people's. I didn't necessarily love it, and I didn't like it, but the things that people got mad about, like,
I was like, when people got mad at certain things, I'm like, did you read A Song of Ice and Fire? I'm like, this was definitely the path. Like they rushed it and they should have done more, sure, execution, but like this was the path.
Yeah, and I do think that there are certain endpoints that maybe, well, there's definitely certain endpoints that will be different, but there's certainly some stuff in there that will be the same. But like it was like things like, oh, the person, I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone, but the person closed the book before the ink was dry. 1 out of 5. I hate this show. And I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Complain about other stuff. There's valid criticisms to be found. And what's more demoralizing about a bad ending than anything? It's not even the ending. It's the fact that all of the conversation then becomes about that. You know what I mean? Like a really good example of this, and this is why I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, is that when you talk Star Wars with anyone, I tried to get into it for the Disney trilogy, right? And I had fun. I wasn't even necessarily like, I know everyone hates the Disney, whatever. I don't care. I thought they were entertaining.
They're good action flicks.
You can't go up to someone and be like, what did you think like the film was trying to nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about the abomination of bringing back a certain villain, and it's like there's no good discussion around it. It's very zeitgeist, popular, versus the old. I don't like that, and I think that's what bad endings end up doing, especially for popular works. It ends up really cheapening the conversation that could be have about the other great parts of the work.
Yeah. I see someone's asking me a very specific Angela question. There are a couple things I am known for on my channel, and Machineries of Empire is one of them. This is by Yoon-Ha Lee. It's a sci-fi trilogy by Yoon, and it's the first book's 9 Fox Gambit. I don't think you've read it, right, Jimmy?
No, I have no idea, but my book is lit. Thank you for the 5 spot. I'm going to let Angela take this one.
So, is it dense like Malazan? No. Is it confusing like Malazan? Yes. Like all 3, the entire trilogy is as long as like Dead House Gates. So like we're not even near the word count or page count or length and sentence structure. It doesn't get philosophical. They are both military fiction. So one's military sci-fi, one's military fantasy. And yeah, it's very much both though have those, is it called in media res? I don't know how to say it, but you get dropped in the middle and there is no info dump for a very long time to help you out.
I kind of like that. I kind of love being thrown into the deep end now.
And also Yoon-Ha Lee has aphantasia, and the way that they describe scenes works really well for my brain. Like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm like, this looks pretty. I don't know. It's sci-fi because there's a technology called exotics. And sometimes it's described like ice, and there's these cool colors. And I did make a world building explanation video for this series specifically because I knew this was the hard part about it. But you don't need it. The books do explain it. You just have to trust it. But if you don't want to trust it and you're just like, I'm too confused to enjoy, I have that video. But it's not dense like Malazan. But it is like I love the puzzliness of Malazan. It's one of my favorite things is to capture different lore threads and like connect them to each other and like think about it. I did the same thing with Nine Fox Gambit. So if you like puzzling, it's really good for that. But I think it's more forgiving than Malazan because it is shorter. You get payoff quicker, and it's I don't know. It's great. Yeah. And they both do the same thing, though, where they introduce me to really cool characters that I want points of view from. And the instant I find them to be cool, I get to, you experience it from other people, like how in Malazan we experience things more from like boots on the ground or, it's never the cool guy. We don't get Coltane's perspective, right?
Right. I actually have a Chain of Dog shirt on underneath this. So that's very thematic. It's on brand, I would say. Yeah, I mean, that sounds really interesting. I'd never even heard of this.
Yeah, no, it was up for a Hugo nomination. I think each book was. They never won any because it's a little weird. And it's not like divisive in sci-fi spaces, but it's definitely like it's your taste or it's not your taste. Like if someone reads it and is like, I couldn't get it, I'm like, that makes sense. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
It's not for everyone.
That's how I feel about Malazan. Like, I recommend it to people who are very curious. Like if being stumped makes you curious, probably going to work out for you. If it does not, and you want everything to be very neatly tied, I don't think it would be for you. It's one of those things. I love it, but I don't know if I'll recommend it to everyone I come across.
Yeah, no, and I gave Machineries of Empire to Alan because he keeps complaining that book series are too long and books are too long. And I'm like, this is a 300-page book. This is 300 pages.
Just trying to appease his appetite, and Alan will get to it in about 3 years. Yeah, maybe.
Well, and it's like a bush that I specifically do push onto Malazan fans who are like, I don't like sci-fi. I'm like, well, I don't think that's true. I think in every genre, even like genres that like I don't usually touch, like I don't read as much historical fiction and literary fiction, but I do have favorites there. Like you can find stuff, but in terms of like its world building and its social commentary, it's pretty good.
That's awesome.
I have not watched this yet, but I want to.
Yeah, Super Games Bros with my friend Matt, who has a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. He has a Heroes of the Horn podcast, which is blowing up right now, and as a brand new Harry Potter podcast for the Elder Wand. Is asking Jimmy, will you be watching The Witcher season 2? I actually watched episode 1 before we went live, and I have to tell you, folks, if I'm being honest, it was awesome. It was so good. I actually loved, and I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, but there is a Game of Thrones actor that I think is universally beloved that shows up in the episode.
I know who you're talking about, I think. Yeah.
Kills the role. I thought that this episode was as good as the best of season 1, maybe even better. The budget looks like it was increased. The shots were much better. I thought the writing was good. And they actually started to give Geralt a little bit more of a rounded personality other than him just saying the F word and being like stoic. Like,
listen, I loved that, but also I thought his personality was also his muscles. So
yeah, yes, his biceps had great wit. Sarah says hello.
Sarah.
So yeah, man, I thought that season 2 of Witcher got off the right, like way better than season 1 got off to, even though I think the Butcher fight scene was sick. I have a pretty good feeling that season 2 of Witcher is going to captivate me. So
I'm annoyed with myself. So when season 1 came out, I binged it because I really liked the first 2 short story collections, and I then read it. Then I watched it like in like 2 or 3 days. I had my own apartment back then, and I just sat in my living room in the dark with my big TV, and I just consumed it. But then last fall, I made my roommates rewatch it with me, and they like it. So now I have to watch it with them. But
my wife really enjoyed season 1. And she reads some fantasy. She's reading She Who Became the Sun, which I know you reviewed on your channel. And Rhythm also reviewed that book and really enjoyed it. She's reading it right now. But like, she's not necessarily one to like sit down and watch like a fantasy show, right? But we watched Witcher last year, and it was one of the best times we had with TV last year. And it's flawed. Like, it has some stuff wrong. Like the dragon CGI was pretty bad, but like You said Xena Warrior Princess. And
Yeah,
I'm
do we
glad you
remember
did.
when fish weren't even alive and they were throwing them? Like, we are blessed.
Dude, I love Xena. I love Hercules. And I felt like Witcher was the new embodiment of that, like the show. And I do think that this season seems to be a little bit more serious. Also,
fine.
the girl who is acting as Ciri is awesome. At least in episode 1, I was so impressed. Like, I don't really remember her performance so much from last year, but this first episode, really good.
I'm really excited because I really liked season 1, faults and all. I had a blast. I watched it again with my roommates, and I've read all of the books. I don't know if you've read all the books or if you played the game.
I've only played the games.
So I have read all. I haven't read the standalone. I do want to read it because I think that's actually one I'll like. And I loved the short story collections. I thought they were so cool. And then I read the novels. And the first novel, I'm like, okay, I still like this. And then the rest are, you know how authors sometimes create characters that they then end up hating and don't want to write about anymore? That's how I feel he feels about Geralt. Because Geralt literally is like on 40% of the pages, maybe 30% in the entire series. And I'm just like, then don't call it The Witcher. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and that seems to be a pretty popular opinion. Like, people say that the books end up falling off. Some people's favorite is the first 2 short story collections.
Well, and I think the books themselves probably are good at doing the project they want to do, which is a very unique project, I think. I've not actually read a fantasy story told in the narrative framework that it is, but it shouldn't have been called The Witcher. And so I'm excited, though, because you don't pay Henry Cavill to be in your show and only show him 30% of the time.
No, he puts a pretty big bill. Right?
So I'm just excited for that.
And Matt's reading through them right now, and he says that he is a big fan. I want to bring it back up here real quick because Daniel asked a question. He said, do you think someone could experience Malazan through audio and capture the nuances of the story and follow all the threads? I have a friend who's curious but only listens to audiobooks. My take on this, and I'd love to hear yours as well, Angela. My take is that it's not great to start on audio, but I do think that after probably maybe halfway through book 2, you could. It's going to be difficult. Yeah. But I know for a fact that Rhythma listens to a lot of Malazan on audio, and now what she's doing, she's listening to a chapter and then going back and reading the chapter. So she's like double reading almost. Nice. So I would say it's not impossible. Starting off in Gardens of the Moon on audio would be a tall task, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it also depends on the person. This person sounds like they have really good audio retention. Like for me, I am easily distracted and I'm bad at keeping my brain focused when I listen to an audiobook. So I'd have to be pressing rewind like all the time if I did that versus if I daze off in a book, I just go back a couple sentences. It's not that much work. Mm-hmm. But if they have good audio retention, I think you can do it. I mean, they know in science that like audio and visual, like it goes to the same part of your brain. So it just depends on who you are as a person.
Yeah, for certain. And one thing I would say is, one line makes a big difference in these stories. So yeah. It'd be one of those things that hopefully, if they're listening to audio, I feel like they're probably that kind of person. So why not try it?
Well, and also like worst case is they do miss something that will, if it's important enough, be connected later. And if they love it, they'll reread it and they'll pick it up later. Like even
Erickson doubles back. He'll explain something to you when it happens. You know?
Well, and like even me who was taking notes, writing in the book, like I know I missed things. So there's no way to be careful enough to catch everything.
Matt wanted to ask you, are you watching The Wheel of Time?
Yes. And I have literally the lowest expectations. So I'm loving it. I have no complaints.
I watched the first 3 and haven't watched any since, but it's not really my bag. Maybe when they're all out, maybe I'll binge them or something. I know it sounds like they're diverging pretty far away from the source material, and that is a point of contention. I think most people are probably fine with it.
I think it's bold because some of it. So sometimes when you make an adaptation, there are changes, but they're like little things.
Yeah.
But like this one, they do make some pretty dramatic changes, but I don't hate them. But also, I do not like the execution of the story in the source materials. So.
Yeah, you're very much in the kind of the same boat I was, but you're continuing, like you're going.
Yeah, I just read what I consider the first book in the slog, Path of Daggers, number 8. I'm only continuing because my friend Stephanie's reading them with me.
Yeah. Super Games Bros here, Matt. Heroes of the Horn is that podcast, and they're doing a read along. They're breaking right now, but whenever they get back to the reread after season 1, they're going to be doing Lord of Chaos, and I'll probably join them and just listen to it on audio.
That's what I do. Like, so I know my audio retention's bad. I know this about myself. I know I'm missing things, but also 80% of it doesn't matter. So
my audio retention has went way up. Also, Evie says that she listened to Gardens and was 70% audio and was fine. So that's awesome. I mean, I do a lot of immersion reading with Malazan. And
same.
Angela, you actually said something to me. I think it was on Voxer, and I loved what you said. Is that sometimes Erickson writes a sentence that you just have to hear out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
There are very few authors I feel that about, but like, I mean, considering we're from an oral society, right? We started with storyteller oral, and like some of it just sounds like someone is around a fireplace or a campfire and they're just telling me and they're just slowly describing the scene. And I just like, I mean, when I first started reading, it was, I guess, audiobooks. My mom was reading me books. Like she read me all of Little House on the Prairie and like the first 4 Harry Potter books. So that's how I first started hearing stories. And it was reminding me of those times for some reason, even though those are like kids' books.
You know, that's funny you say that, because the thing that I loved whenever I was a kid in elementary school, after recess and lunch, I had a first grade teacher named Miss Wetzel, and she would sit us down and she would read to us. And that was pretty common. Like it was like story time all the way up in the 5th grade. They did this at my school. And I remember like my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Lemley, reading Where the Red Fern Grows. And I just loved it. And that has stuck with me for my entire life. You know, almost drifting off because you're tired from your big carb heavy lunch. And you're like, oh God, I got to find out what happens to these dogs. But like, you know, you're almost in like a fever dream state, you know, trying to stay awake. And most kids hated story time. Like they would like, you know, act out or get in trouble. I always just loved it. And I think that's why I like audiobooks so much. And it does kind of give me that same feel, depending on the narrator.
It's very narrator dependent. Like I have some narrators that I will automatically try out the audiobook if I see their names attached to it. And others, like I'll try out and I'm like, this just isn't working for me. And so like I know a lot of my friends didn't like the narrator for live ships. So
oh yeah, I believe it's the same narrator that does Rainwild Chronicles, and if that is the case, yeah, wasn't a huge, super big fan. I like this question a lot from Daniel. He says, which series would you say you prefer in terms of adaptation, Angela, The Witcher or The Wheel of Time, since both first seasons have been experienced more or less?
I mean, so from which one do I enjoy more? It's The Witcher, because I enjoy The Witcher as a character. Give me a grumpy monster hunter who hates his own, you know, humanity any day with some go lucky. Like that's my trope candy right there. I just love the existence of Geralt.
Yes.
And I really think what they did in the first season, where they like did the different timelines and how they wove it together, I thought it was bold. I thought they really trusted the audience and like didn't like handhold them through that. I thought that was great. Wheel of Time's fine. I will say, based off what the fans have said, and I do think when you do an adaptation, changes are okay as long as you stay to the soul of the material. And I do think a lot of fans have been let down by the Wheel of Time. So I guess in terms of, are you keeping the soul of it alive? Have you kept what made it special to people? I think the Wheel of Time show really chose to just be like, this is inspired by Robert Jordan's works. You know, I think that took a more inspiration route, whereas Witcher does feel like people love the games, people love the books, let's mesh it together. And like, yes, Geralt is wittier in the books and in the games, and that's starting to come through now, and it wasn't as there in the first season. But for the most part, Henry Cavill is Geralt of Rivia. Like,
oh yeah, and even Andre said, like, he was like, yeah, that's Geralt now, guys. Like, that's canon.
Yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're in like, I just feel like, so if you're saying adaptation, it's also Witcher. Like, Wheel of Time is fine. It's entertaining to me, but also like, it's not mind blowing. I think it's nice to have existing, because I don't think we have just a standard, well funded fantasy epic narrative. Yeah. We have political dramas, and we have kind of the campy adventure stories like, you know, Witcher and Xena, and we have our school stories like Harry Potter. We don't just have a typical quest story fantasy epic with a budget.
Yeah.
And we just don't have that.
And then next year, I think we will, with the Tolkien show coming out. You know, that'll be really, really big. And then House of the Dragon. But I think House of the Dragon, I mean, it's obviously going to be pretty epic, but I also think House of the Dragon is going to be a lot of politics, you know, things that we loved from Game of Thrones as well. So I think it's important for Wheel of Time to be adapted properly. And to be honest, like, I know there's complaints and whatnot, and it's not even really for me. Seems like the reception online is pretty good with the general audience. I have a coworker who actually was not. He thought the trailer was bad. He thought all the leaks were bad, and he's not a fantasy fan, folks. Like he's watched Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. He's a TV show person, right? He's like, I'll be honest, kind of interested in this Wheel of Time thing after he watched the first 3 episodes, and I was like, well, damn, and he's keeping up with. I'm not. So I mean, they must be doing something right.
Well, I mean, they did. So I mean, they had to do something smart, which is how do you make Eye of the World intriguing? Because Eye of the World is not intriguing.
Like, I like Eye of the World.
Yes, you can like it, but it's like a cozy fantasy quest story. But at no point when you're reading Eye of the World are you actually asking the question, who is the dragon reborn?
Well, yeah, so they had to add the mystery. I think they also probably took a lot of time to make sure that it wasn't too Tolkien derivative in the show, presented that way, especially with a Tolkien show coming down the pipe to remind everybody about Lord of the Rings. Not that anyone needed reminding. And I think that from what I saw in the first 3 episodes, seems fine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good. And I think it will work better for a general audience who doesn't know it's coming. I think it's lackluster-ish when you know it's coming, which is why I've enjoyed the changes, because I'm like, oh, I didn't see that coming. That's cool. And also, character dynamics are not centered around power struggles and bickering for once. We actually just have different drama, which is nice.
Yeah, that would have been a relief when I was reading the books for sure. B Money Baby says, did you guys watch the video Pat Rothfuss reading the first page of Doors of Stone? Not gonna lie, it was good. So for those who don't know, Patrick Rothfuss had a goal on Twitch. He was like playing some game. I don't know. There was a charity, and he said, if my crowd donates $333,000, I will read. I think it was a prologue and like a chapter from Doors of Stone. If you guys help out this charity, obviously everyone pitched in. Great cause. And he read the prologue and the chapter. I did not listen to either because I haven't read Kingkiller yet, and I don't want to be spoiled for anything, or I would just like to go into it fresh. But all the things I've heard, people seemed really excited about it, and people said they feel like Patrick Rothfuss maybe got like some fire lit under him from the buzz. So that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't, mainly because I mean, the narrative framework of the trilogy is each is a separate day at this bar, and it's Quoth telling his story of his glory days. And so book 3 is day 3. So I assumed it was going to start similarly to the other 2, although I do remember something dramatic was happening at the end of one of the books. I don't know. It's been so long. I read these in 2014 or something like that.
It's been a while.
Well, it's one of those things where I liked reading them. I thought they were good, and I loved theorizing about what's happening, where are we going, but it's no fun to just theorize in circles for me. I know some people are like, it's just beautifully written and I could just enjoy it, but Quoth is not quite likable enough for me to keep experiencing his story on loop.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
He's okay. He's not bad. I don't hate him as much as some people do in Wise Man's Fear. But no, I mean, him and Martin, it's interesting because I don't mind that it takes forever for art to happen. Do you? I mean, I understand. Life happens. But I will say, I don't have that leeway with writing my thesis, and I have gotten my undergrad degree, my master's, and my PhD, and it's been a long time since 2011.
Yeah, it's been a while. That's for sure.
Because I think both of those last books came out in 2011.
Yeah, I think you're actually. I know because I've been.
Yeah, well, you've been waiting for
reminded. I've been reminded about Winds of Winter not being released every day of my life. But yeah, I think you're right though about Wise Man's Fear as well. I think it was 2011. Someone can fact check us in the.
Yeah, it's been a minute, and like I get it. Things will happen. I mean, I'm excited. I'm more excited for Kingkiller to maybe get an ending than I am about Winds of Winter.
How dare you?
Mainly because A Song of Ice and Fire has never been my type of fantasy. I read it only because it became an HBO show and it was one of those classics. So I wanted to be the friend who had read the books so I could explain the scenes.
Right.
And like, it wasn't a bad exercise. It's a very low magic fantasy world, and I'm not a low magic fantasy reader. So
I clearly love A Song of Ice and Fire, right? During this reread, I've realized that I have allowed people to shame me into thinking that George was not as good of a writer as I thought he was. You know what I mean? Like for some reason, people just like rip George a new one. Not for like the weight, but I mean literally his writing, because he has some really cringy voyeurism, like sex stuff in his books, right? I rereading this for whatever the time this is. I will never let someone sway me ever again. I forgot how much I personally love his writing and his approach to narrative.
This happens to me with Sanderson a lot because, like, I don't read him all the time anymore. I don't have the time. I do read a few Sanderson a year because I love rereading. I'm just a rereader, and there's usually a new Sanderson book every year. Yeah, 2011. I also graduated from high school. I lost all of my youthful freedom. It's not a good year.
I turned 21 and had my first WWE tryout in 2011.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
so,
it was a good year.
But
for me.
But like, you know, you get on booktube and like there's all sorts of opinions about everything, which is great, but lots of people will like talk negatively about his writing, and it's more just a taste difference, right? It's just a different style.
Yeah.
I'll be like, will I like it anymore? Like, do I still like how he writes? Like, and I'll pick it up and I'm like, no, this works with my brain's good. Everything's fine.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of weird. Alan talked about this last week. He was saying, or 2 weeks ago on the last show, he's talking about how, like, if you love Sanderson, you're just a fanboy, and if you hate Sanderson, you're a snob. Like, there's no in between, and both are true in some facet. And for me, it's weird because I'm like somewhere in the middle. Like, he's a hit or miss author with me. Do I enjoy his writing as much as Hop? No, but do I appreciate the way he writes his stories? Like, does it fit his stories? Absolutely. Yeah. My number one review on my channel is my Way of Kings review, where I was pretty hyperbolic. Like, I kind of wish I could correct myself a little bit. I was very excited, but you know what? No, I don't. Never mind. I don't.
Say if it
was my
captures an emotion of a time, that's it. Time capsule.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, I got so fired up reading Way of Kings. I had a blast reading that book. So you know what? I'm happy because I was happy then. And I remember we were moving, so I was like really stressed out, and that book just hit me at the right time. But it is weird because like he's not my favorite author. Stormlight's I don't know where Stormlight is in my favorites of all time or whatever, but it's my most popular review. So like I'm somewhere in the middle where people think I'm either like I get yelled at from both crowds. Like either being a hater or being a fan, but it's weird. It's very strange.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where like I don't really care if people don't like it as long as they're like polite. Like that's like anything, yes. Right?
Yes.
Like,
yes, absolutely.
Well, and like so Leanna and I, you know Leanna, right? From Leanna's Library.
Yeah, we're doing the Song of Ice.
Yeah. Sorry, my thesis brain is bad.
Okay, it's all good.
But she really doesn't like Way of Kings. I convinced her not to try it again because when the hype was happening last year, she was like, well, maybe I will like it and I should try Words of Radiance. Like, stop it. I do not need you to trash my favorite books again. Because I had to watch her hour-long trash review before doing a podcast with her because we were doing, like, pros and cons of Stormlight Archive. So I needed to know what her negatives were so I had good, like, not so much rebuttals, but just prepared.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just like, it was so hard because we just disagree a lot. It's to the point where if she hates a fantasy book, I'm like on the TBR. Like
those people are important, man.
Yeah, we really do love some things. Like we both love Robin Hobb and we both love Jemison. But
yeah, I mean, and it's funny. There are people who I have, friends that posted videos that I totally disagree with. And I can still be their friend. It's not the end. It's not an end all be all kind of thing. But like, for instance, like I defend Dune quite a bit against the idea that it is this white savior story, because I have read on, right, but not everybody's read on. And now I say read on. I've read book 2.
I would say that people are okay. I haven't read Messiah. I thought it was very obvious in the original Dune that it's not a white savior story. He's like an imbecile. That's my argument.
That's what I was going to say. I say even though I read book 2 and technically read on, I think it's pretty clear.
I don't know. I mean, I don't love Dune as much as most people. I'm very middle. It's a 4-star read. It's classic. It's fine. I was just surprised that it read modern when I picked it up.
Yeah, I think Herbert was way ahead of his time, and that narrative and of it being a problem. I just I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but like I have friends who have made videos about that, and I'm totally cool with it, even though I do vehemently disagree. So I assume that's probably how you felt whenever Leanna did her Way of Kings review.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm the type of person who, if I know I love something too much to be critical, I just run away from the negative reviews because it's entertainment and I can do what I want. Like it's not like science and facts, like it's a story.
Yeah, sometimes you have to really remind yourself, like especially when you do post videos and stuff, that like at the end of the day it is whatever you want it to be, and like nothing we do is objectively true. Like nothing we say is fact. Now, some people get offended by the delivery of opinions because it can come off as if it's an objective truth. But I try to make sure the subjectivity is implied whenever I do things. And I do use like buyout statements like, in my opinion and such. But at the end of the day, we're just saying what we turned on a camera. That's the only real difference, right?
I'm just a person who's read a lot of fantasy books, like a lot. Like you were surprised I had read that one fantasy book, the Apocalypse series. What is the name of that whole series?
I was going to bring that up. I thought you were going to pull out Library of Mount Char because
Oh, I have read that too, but that's a little more popular.
Is it? My patron Amanda, I would do a random book every month for my patrons, and she won in October. It was a great October read. And I'm just like, this is the weirdest book I've ever read.
It's so good, though.
I saw it was on your list, your top fantasy. And I was like, you are the only other person I know other than Amanda that has read this.
I got it from Reddit. That was like, I didn't want to read Malazan, but people were also mentioning this book. And I'm like, this looks interesting. I picked it up and I happened to have read it right after watching the first season of Umbrella Academy. And there's a lot of weird overlap between those two media.
You know what? I could see that.
Of like kids being brought in by this weird dude and like being like hyper trained in certain disciplines. And
that is actually, yeah,
it's always funny when things hit at the right time. But like, I binged that in like 2 or 3 days, which is fast for me. And it's bizarre.
It's one of the weirdest stories. You want to talk about a genre bender. I don't know where you put Library of Mount Char. I'm glad I read it. He hasn't really written anything else.
Yeah, he's like mostly, I think, a data scientist or a computer person. Like,
I wish he would dive back in because that dude's got a weird brain.
Yeah, it was like really fun. Like, I don't think it's anything deep, but it was just like, it was just a blast. I was like, I don't know what's happening next. Nothing feels too contrived. I'm just figuring it up. Like, I don't know.
There's Amanda. She says, see, Angela knows what's up.
Yeah, no, so I had read that because Reddit told me to.
You might be the most varied reader. And the reason why I say this is because I know you had read Robin Hobb, and watching your channel, I know that you were trying to, really diversify your reads. But then whenever you told me that you have read Prince of Nothing by Scott Baker, I was like, okay, we click, like we get each other.
Yeah, and that one wasn't from the internet. When I first moved to Boston, it was the one time I'd ever seen Brandon Sanderson in person. He came to a bookstore in Boston. It was like my second month living here. I took all of my books onto the train to get to this bookstore. He signed them all, and in line, I met a couple people. And we all like exchanged numbers, and we did a casual book club for a while, and someone nominated The Prince of Nothing. And that's why I read it. He still has not finished the series. I am positive. I don't know what he's doing in his life. He does like a Big Brother podcast. So he has like different stuff that he does. Mm-hmm. But I read all 7.
That's
it's 7,
awesome.
Right? Yeah, it's 7.
Yeah, it's 7. And then he has another series that he can't find a publisher for it, from what I understand. I haven't read the second stuff yet. And I know that's where it gets pretty divisive among the fans of the series.
It has so much potential.
First off, Prince of Nothing trilogy, because that's what I've read. The themes in those books and the ideas explored are, in my opinion, among the top I've ever read. I mean, his writing, when it's on point, is the best. It's so good.
And nothing is darker. I've never read anything darker.
You know what? So, yes, because of the ideas behind it, I think. But I have read things that have been more disgusting to read, if that makes sense.
I don't know, man. Some of the stuff, especially, I can't remember her name, but the female character who's
Esme.
Yeah, so with her, I mean, it's not even just her prostitution that grosses me out. It's prostitution with that specific creature. That was really gross.
Yeah, now that you're mentioning it, I mean, I have definitely read a lot of like grimdark stuff. Like, I'm not even pushing back that it's but I guess what I'm trying to say is the execution of it. I haven't read those sequels, but in the trilogy, I thought the execution of it like warranted the scene, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I mean, it fit the tone, fit the narrative. It wasn't out of place. But it's like when people tell me First Law trilogy is great.
Oh yeah,
I'm just like, okay.
No, First Law is a comedy. First off,
that's how I have fun with it. I only have fun reading First Law if I think it's a comedy.
Yeah, folks, if you are going to read Prince of Nothing and you think, oh, this is going to be like First Law, I could not warn you more against it. That is not what you're getting into. There are no laughable. I think there's one laughable moment, I thought, in the entire trilogy. So if for people who do like grimdark and such, Prince of Nothing is definitely at a different level. I'm currently reading Land Fit for Heroes by Richard K. Morgan, which Joe Abercrombie is a huge fan of. Have you ever read those?
No.
damn, I can't find a single person. I don't know anybody. Well, actually, that's not true. Slowly Read, my boy Mark. He is the Grimdark guru, I think is what Philip calls him. That dude's read everything Grimdark. And I would love to bring him on, talk about a various amount of topics. But it reminds me a lot of Prince of Nothing because it has like that kind of like ancient race that feels alienish, and I can't say anything else because of spoilers. But man, Land Fit for Heroes is also very disturbing. Like some of the scenes, but Richard K. Morgan does not write poetically like R. Scott Baker does. He writes, like what's happening. He will tell you in detail, and it sometimes it can make you cringe just a little bit. It's rough,
I mean, I think part of it is I've read a lot of what people have. I mean, grimdark, like any genre, what does it mean? But I've read a lot of what people claim is grimdark. Between that, First Law, isn't A Song of Ice and Fire considered grimdark? I don't know.
Actually, for grimdark diehards, the people who like really subscribe to that subgenre, I believe that is not considered.
Regardless. But I have read, and I know this is grimdark, Black Company, and I don't love it. And so I kind of stopped reading it because I just think it wasn't for me, especially since I think grimdark books are trying to be more ideas books in fantasy. Like they are really trying to look at an idea in society and really unpack it, which is fine. But I think I prefer seeing that darker point of view in sci-fi. And I do not know why. It's just window dressing, right? But I prefer the harsher societies in my sci-fi books.
Do you feel like maybe that's because that's how you feel the future will be?
No, I'm not that pessimistic. I just think sometimes you can do some really cool dystopian stuff. I'm not that. I mean,
you could see it's a possibility that something could go wrong, right?
Yeah, well, like for example, I wouldn't consider Machineries of Empire grimdark, but it does have some disturbing ideas of like their military system is a hive mind that is imposed hierarchy. There is compulsion involved, which is unsettling.
Yeah,
you know, like, and that is kind of, it's literally trained into them and stuff like that. And like that society itself, at first you're just like, typical. It's a military sci-fi. Of course, don't trust the military. That's like, I don't think I'm spoiling anything for anyone who's ever read a military X anything. Like, you're not supposed to trust the organization that you're with. Like, I don't know. That's like something I've learned a long time ago. But then it really unpacks how despicable this society is. And it's very slow burn. You guess. There's a lot of, I don't think something's right, but you don't get the curtain pulled for a while. And you're like, oh, this place is nasty. Yeah. But it doesn't have a grimdark tone.
Yeah, it's interesting because you actually brought up something that I wanted to talk about, and I kind of told you before we went live about a tweet that infuriated me this week, and I almost made a video about it, but I was like, I better not because I was like really fired up. And that's like about, and this extends past. I'll read the tweet. This is from theonering.net, which, if this was anybody on Twitter. If this is some random person, I wouldn't have a problem with this, but this is an account with over 100,000 followers. And this is the tweet. And I think it's insulting, but I also think it's dead wrong. So the tweet was, there's an absurd level of nihilism in HBO Succession and Game of Thrones that feels abusive towards its viewers, subjecting us to pure ugliness week after week. Unrelenting emotional brutality is something Tolkien was well aware of and went to great length to balance trauma. So first off, this is a brain dead tweet. I don't necessarily, someone actually said last show in the chat, they said, I feel like Jimmy doesn't like go off, like he holds himself back. Well, this is me not holding myself back. While still, I've cooled off a little bit, but this is one of the dumbest tweets I've ever seen in my life. So the OneRing.net is an account that is obviously all about Tolkien, and that's cool. I'm down. But there is a nauseating high horse that I see from the people who enjoy Tolkien. I enjoy Tolkien. I mean, he's my gateway to fantasy. Okay. But there's something about them feeling, and Chris Bookish Cauldron tweeted this, and I like this a lot, and this is how I feel, that art has a responsibility to make you feel good. And I think that's nonsense. I think it cheapens art, and I don't think that it has any sort of responsibility to make you sleep well at night. I really don't. Now, if that's what you get out of the work, or if that is the purpose of the work, that is fine. But things like Prince of Nothing, things like, I guess, A Song of Ice and Fire, which I could argue if it's nihilistic or not. I don't really care, to be honest. Like, I think that's the point, is like, art can be nihilistic if it wants to be. Like, that is a valid purpose behind art. But to say that you are being subjected to abuse while you watch on an HD TV on a premium network channel that you pay for is just, like, to me, mind-boggling.
The idea that you couldn't just not watch it.
Yes. And it would be one thing if you said, I don't like where this is going, but you're saying I'm being subjected to abuse, and to everyone that actually goes through abuse in life. I think that is just one of the most insulting things that I've ever read from an account that has 100,000 followers. It's just, it's honestly, it's disgusting considering that there's millions of people in the world that don't know where their next meal comes from. And you're being subjected to abuse. And I'm not saying that problems are relative, real problems, right? Like finance, whatever it might be. But this, I don't know. It boggled my mind.
Yeah. It's just so weird when people get so worked up about things that aren't, like, these are extracurricular activities.
Yes.
Like art, like, so I think someone said art is, well, there's that one, but there was also someone who said that it's meant to be different emotions. I'm like, yeah, and it's, so there's the intention of the artist, and then there's the reaction of the consumer, and they don't always have to align. It happens, but like, yes, sometimes, you know, an artist is hoping one thing will happen when someone sees their work, and then something else happens when someone consumes it. But then sometimes someone does get exactly what that artist was going for, you know? And
yeah. And also, do we not find hope in different things when we read?
Yeah.
When people tell me that they find A Song of Ice and Fire to be too dark and stuff, that's valid. That's a real thing. But when I read A Song of Ice and Fire and I get to a Samwell chapter, I'm cheering for Samwell. Yeah. He's annoying. He could be a bit of a crybaby, but you know what? Damn it, Samwell steps up when the time's right, and he's becoming a hero in his own right. He's the improbable hero that is kind of, I think, undervalued, and he's not just the only one. The friendships that get formed that are unlikely in that series give me a lot of hope that maybe I can reach across the aisle and be able to connect with someone that I might disagree with or think the worst of. So for someone to cheapen it and say that it's an abusive product, and obviously it's not about the TV show here, but I'm relating it to the books. I don't know. That tweet really triggered me. It got me.
I mean, there were some choices they made in the show that I felt, it's interesting because when I read the books, I don't actually remember explicit main character sexual assault. I mean, I remember the sexual assault that was on page, but there weren't that many main character moments. And almost every questionable sexual scene that was in the book became blatant rape in the show. And I was just like, but that's not what happened on page.
Well, yeah, they definitely tuned it up. Actually, fun fact, George did not direct, nor did he really like the Theon torture scenes. Yeah. Which I guess spoiler, but the Theon torture scenes were purely Dan and Dave, because those are not in the book, by the way. Now he thinks about back to it, and there's some allusion to maybe he being of what happened to him, but the excruciating detail of what we saw was actually not from George.
Yeah, so there were definitely tonal things that, because when I read A Song of Ice and Fire, it was similar to First Law. It's not a comedy, but I didn't feel, it felt like humanity. It didn't feel necessarily very good or bad. It was just very, every time someone thought of a plan I rooted for, it wasn't going to happen, and I was frustrated, you know, like stuff like that.
The floor falls out, right?
You know, every time I'm like, yeah, Tyrion, that's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah. I guess when I see things like this and people, and this is beyond this, I guess, but I think about things like Prince of Nothing, or honestly, I think about Malazan, because Malazan goes through a lot of really deep and dark themes. And I think it's important to inspect those type of things. And I don't think it necessarily has to be balanced with the feel good ending. You know, I mean, look how Lord of the Rings ends. You know, if you want to use Tolkien as an example, the Shire, right?
Yeah. Well, everyone doesn't know that because they watched the movie.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of being vague. But like, if you haven't read, the Scouring of the Shire is how, and that is something that George is like went on record to say he loves, and I think it's a really important piece of the books. And I wish they would have kept it in the movies, but they didn't, because you got to make it people feel good. And I get it, that's fine, whatever. But then to devalue, like, if you like that, that's fine. But like, then to devalue something that isn't going that direction, I think it's just like really close-minded and narrow-sighted. I just can't stand it. And that tweet made me mad, so I want to talk about it.
Yeah. Tweets rarely make me mad. Well, I
Me
hide all the
either.
tweets that make me mad. Like,
I know, I'm with you. I very rarely react. Even something I disagree with, I generally laugh at it. But for some reason, and I think maybe Chris Bushculture had got me a little fired up because he quote tweeted it, and I was like, "Yeah, get him, Chris," and I was like, "I better get him too." And chain reaction.
yeah, no, I hide a lot. Like something has to become really popular in booktube drama for me to see it on book Twitter. I'm like, well, what is this subtweet? What's happening? How did it get to me?
Yeah, that's how it happens for me. I know everyone complains about Twitter being a cesspool, but I actually really enjoy Twitter because I've curated my feed over like 12 years. So I don't see a lot of stuff like this even. But when it gets quote tweeted or something, it might pop up. And this is the first time I can think of in years and years and years that I've felt like, I don't want to use the word like angry, but I was just like, I have something to say about this.
You wanted to type in the comments section. You wanted to be one of those
Yes.
people.
Yes. I even quote tweeted it, which I never do. But yeah, I had to get that off my chest. And I was actually kind of curious about how you saw that as well, because I'm always willing to admit that maybe I don't see every angle of something. And that I could be wrong.
I mean, there was like, so like, I understand that some people, when they consume art, they do feel, they get triggered and they do have an emotional response that is similar to like a panic attack or depression and stuff like that has happened to me with some books. Like I had to read a book for book club and it literally put me in a depressive spiral because it was just too much. But I chose to finish it for book club. Book club wouldn't have cared if I had finished it or not. And I don't like that book's execution of what it's talking about. But I understand that that's my response to it. Like it's not the book's fault.
Yeah, and also like that, I think that's even a little bit different than kind of what that was getting after. This was almost insinuating that you cannot create a nihilist piece of work. Not even like really talking about the execution of it, but more so just saying that like you shouldn't be putting nihilism on television weekly, which that sounds like censorship to me. Like this sounds like we're deleting works at that point, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I'm usually pretty anti-censorship, but I also was raised in a household where my mom let me read like anything I wanted at whatever age, and if she knew it had like explicit material, she's like, "Okay, ask me questions if you care," because I think she let me read like Memoirs of a Geisha when I was like in 7th grade or something.
I read it at 11, and I've been watching like horror movies my entire childhood. You know, my parents trusted me to be able to discern these things, and I think that leash actually provided me with a pretty open mind as I grew older.
You're lucky you got to choose to watch horror. My dad just didn't know it was child appropriate. I was just shown things and I'm like, this is not okay. I don't want to watch this. Like, okay, here's a movie that's actually funny, but I will always be scared of, and it's Mars Attack. I watched that as like a 9-year-old.
You know what movie scared me, and now it's almost like a comedy to people, is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That movie scared me when I was a kid a lot, but now you talk about it with adults and I'm like, oh, that movie's ridiculous. Like it's kind of like a cult classic.
Yeah. No, I mean Mars Attack. Yeah, no, that ack haunts me. It haunts me. The music they use so creepy. And when you're a 9-year-old, you don't know to not care about what happens to your government. Okay, there's a scene that's like really big in that movie, and you're as a kid, I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? And then there's like body horror, and I'm just like, this. There's no amount of it's not unusual to undo that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, no, my dad tried to show me Gremlins 2. He tried to show us Final Destination.
Yeah, Final Destination was the jam, man. I never want to get on an airplane ever after that.
My dad literally just wanted to watch things. And then he loved the Sci-Fi Channel, which obviously Sci-Fi Channel ranges from Star Trek, which is kid-friendly, to like B sci-fi movies with monsters and stuff.
Yeah, Star Trek's actually a really good, I think it's really good for kids. There's a lot of good lessons to be learned. And
oh, I love Star Trek. It's probably why I don't love Star Wars. I know it's so cliche to have Trekkies versus Star Wars, but I did learn that this year.
Angela's drawing the line, folks. You heard it. Holy war.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Star Trek is like a consistent world over how many series and different directors?
I'd be interested to hear a Star Wars fan respond to that, because it's that's
Star like Wars is fine. I don't hate Star Wars, but it's the definition of power creep, and you can't convince me otherwise.
That's amazing.
So, and well, and also I do think, although both are set in space, Star Wars leans more into fantasy tropes as a story, and Star Trek is more of a sci-fi thing. And they're just different. They're actually just very different.
Yeah, they're very, very different.
And I mean, I also do love serialized sci-fi. Doctor Who is also something I really loved as a kid.
I've never really gotten to Doctor Who. I've never got into it.
I have a Doctor Who poster right there. I got two TARDISes on my Christmas tree.
That's like one of the things I get asked about the most. Like, well, what's your favorite thing in Doctor Who? I'm like, I don't watch it, and people get really disappointed, and then I feel bad. But it's just something I've never really been too interested in.
Gloomhaven setup time is only like 20 minutes, not even, if you have the box organizer and you use the app for the monsters.
There's an app?
Uh-huh.
Oh, because we started playing, me and my wife were playing Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. We were having so much fun, and we were finally getting to the point where like you kind of have everything available to you, and you're like actually playing. And then we just kind of stopped, and now we know if we go back, it's been like a year, and we're like, if we go back now, we'll have to start over. And it's like, oh
yeah,
God.
I mean, the app is more just like a more condensed like record keeping device versus having all the. I mean, I don't know what Jaws of the Lion looks like. I have a really big Gloomhaven box.
I do have Gloomhaven. I've never opened it. I have Gloomhaven. I got on a sale. But I have Jaws of the Lion, and I was going to you can play Jaws of the Lion and then go into Gloomhaven. That was the plan. Another thing, really hard to play board games whenever your cats want to jump on the play table and knock stuff off.
My cats are not allowed on the table. They are behaved.
Well, the game table we play on, they'll jump on that. They don't get on any other tables, but they see the pieces and they're like, oh, and they ruined it. Joanna actually didn't. She said she was playing that. She did not know about this app.
Yeah, I mean, I think now you have to pay for it, but when I got it, it was free. But it honestly, like not having to set up all of the monster stuff saved me so much time. Like I would just only get out pieces because we don't set up all the rooms at once. Some people do. We set them up as you open doors. So just I would have the boxes because in my fancy wooden box thing, I have boxes with each monster and that have color, so it's easy to just take out the boxes that you know are in that encounter.
Yeah.
No, I mean I used to play it every week with my friend before 2020 happened, and so we had it down to a science. And it would be like a Tuesday night, so got it set up in like 10 or 15. It took longer to put away, but then I'd put on like an episode of The Good Place or Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I would just enjoy myself while I put it away.
That's awesome. I used to play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and we had like a competitive group that we traveled with, and like their significant others would come and like we would play board games. But then when we moved, I lost all that, so it's really just me and my wife, and so we have to try to find games that are like good 2-player games, and it's really hard. And I like board games, but like I do tend to play fantasy board games. I'm actually really interested in Call to Adventure, the Stormlight game. Have you played it?
No, mainly because I don't know if I would like it. It's like basically, I think, I haven't played it, making a D&D character. Like, I don't really know what the mechanics are to it. So my friend has the non-Stormlight version. I'd like to play it to know if I'd want the Stormlight. But of all of the Sanderson IP games, the only one I've ever seriously thought about getting was Reckoners, and I don't even like the books. That's my one crime, is as a Sanderson fan, I detest the Reckoners trilogy.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'll stay away.
I mean, you might. This is like a really weird gendered thing to say, but men tend to like it more than women.
Interesting.
I think it's because Sanderson typically writes third person in his adult, right? And in his young adult, he writes first person. And in both Skyward and Reckoners, he writes first person for his main characters, and I find both of them really grating for different reasons. And I think it's because I'm so close to them and I can't get out of their head, and they think really weird in their head. But I know to some people it's relatable, but like the character David in Reckoners thinks he's like the funniest thing in the world. And I'm like, sir.
That can be rough.
And if you don't find him funny, or if you don't relate to that type of quirk, and Spensa has similar quirks where she's very melodramatic and over the top. And I can respect that actually people are like that, or people who relate to that. I
generally don't hang out with them.
Yeah, so.
I respect that they exist, but I don't call them over on Friday nights for dinner.
Yeah. So, and then add that to me hating the main character to like Sanderson normally does great endings. I like his endings.
Yeah.
I hated the reveal ending of Calamity. I'm like, no, you're not Sanderson. Like, no. And I just heard Cytonic has a thing that's made like Jessie May and Jess Owens like kind of like eh. And I'm like, oh, is he
No.
doing it again because it's his young adult sci-fi stuff? So like I just don't trust him as much in the
In
young
that
adult
realm.
space.
Yeah,
Not that I'm a young adult reader anyways, so it's not a big deal.
yeah. I myself don't really read any YA. I guess like some of the like I'm gonna read I think it's The Graveyard Boy or whatever by Neil Gaiman. I think that's like middle grade reading
Yeah, I feel
technically.
like he either writes middle grade or adult. I don't know if there's an in between. I have
Yeah.
unpopular Neil Gaiman opinions though. So
He's very polarizing. Very, very
yeah,
polarizing. Like my patron Discord is very split on Neil Gaiman for sure.
yeah.
I've just read my first ever only Neil. I read Good Omens, but my first ever only Neil Gaiman book was Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I thought it was just absolutely awesome. I loved
You
it.
read the best one first. That's my favorite.
I thought it was enchanting. It motivated me to write, which is always a big.
No, I really like that novella. It's
Oh
really
man,
good.
I thought it was excellent, and yeah, got me thinking.
Also, Good Omens is like 80% Terry Pratchett's authorial voice. So
yeah, that's kind of what because I read Mort and I loved Mort. Good Omens, I liked it. I thought it was good.
yeah, it's 80% like because I read Good Omens in high school because everyone was like it was like this cult classic that everyone was like, oh my god, and I read it. And I'm like, I don't understand anything that's happening. I'm like, I read the words, but I don't get it. And then I read Terry Pratchett in grad school, went back to reread Good Omens. I'm like, this makes sense now. I understand.
Yeah, Good Omens was just like good. I had a good time with it. I was supposed to start the TV show and I still haven't. I'm the worst at watching TV.
David Tennant's so good in it.
Oh, I'm good. I'm definitely going to. Like, I'm excited to watch it. It's just like I need to like one, be in the mood, and then two, like actually just sit down and do this.
Stardust is the one book where I say, don't read the book, watch the movie. That's it.
Interesting.
No, it's because the movie decides to make it a rom-com and add humor, and the book is like a very subdued fairy tale. Like I wouldn't say it's like dark, but it's not. But when you read it versus watching it, you're like this. It's almost like the same amount of time to consume either one. Like a little longer for the book because it's like only a 300-page book. But it's just like there's so much humor and life in the characters in the movie. And that somehow doesn't come across to the book. And it's just really weird.
Interesting. I think I got Neverwhere, Graveyard Boy, and Anisi Boys.
I think you're supposed to read American Gods before that, but
I bought American Gods. That's the last one.
I read American Gods, but I don't remember anything that happened in it. And I usually have a very good memory. That's my problem with Neil Gaiman books is they're usually really long, except for the short one that I like, and I can't remember what happened. So did anything happen?
Yeah, the American Gods is actually, out of every synopsis that I've read, is the one I'm least confident that I'll enjoy, which is interesting because like that seems to be the book people recommend from Gaiman. But I picked it up because I said, well, I got to give it a shot. And I really did click with Ocean at the End of the Lane. So
yeah,
I hope that
my weird unpopular opinion is Robert De Niro's best role is in Stardust. It's amazing.
He's had a lot of really good roles.
No, it's not his Oscar-winning performance, but it's amazing.
Well, that's awesome, though.
No, yeah.
I'll add that to the endless list of movies that I still haven't watched.
I don't know if your wife's the type of person who like wants to watch rom-coms but doesn't want to force you to do it. That's me with my fiance, where like I want to watch rom-coms more often because they make me feel good, but I know it's not his thing. And we watched Stardust, and he really liked it because it's kind of like The Princess Bride, but with a rom-com, and it's got great actors in it. And it's just, yeah.
We don't watch a lot of movies or TV. We're weird like that. She's playing through Last of Us 2 right now, and she's loving that. And I read, which a lot of people probably say usually the husband is playing the video game, but my wife probably plays more video games than me at this point. I think because I read so much. It just depends on the mood, though. But yeah,
I definitely don't play video games. I'm bad at them. I'm the oldest. So I would have been the one that had to vouch and get the gaming systems, but I wasn't a boy, so it didn't happen.
I find movies, TV, and games right now to be really, really hard to get into and to dedicate time to, because I really do, one, enjoy reading more, and two, reading holds my engagement way better than games and TV and movies. I never thought I'd say that, if you would ask me 10 years ago, but it's true. I get way more engaged in a book.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it depends. I'm just also really bad at it. Like, it's a dexterity thing. I'd have to learn that skill. And I'm like, where am I going to find the time to put in the hundreds of hours required to learn how to jump in Super Mario? Because that's what I'm talking about when it comes to bad skills. Okay? Like, we're talking real basic stuff that everyone already learned. I'm very good at Rock Band and DDR, Dance Dance Revolution. I'm good at the ones where you use your body. Because I play instruments.
I'll say that those are games. Those are popular games too, so they count.
Well, I think I think reading's a great way to pass time. I think watching movies or TV. I think playing games. We're all consuming stories in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the harder things for me because most games I play nowadays, because I don't have the time to be. If I do a competitive multiplayer game, I'm playing it competitively. Like I can't chill. It's just not in me. So I play a lot more single player story driven games, and it's not always true, but a large amount of the time, video game stories are so paper thin and over the top tropey. And I just read an amazing book. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, what's the point here? Like, I don't necessarily care about this gameplay as much. There's certain games where I do. Like, I love the Dark Souls franchise, which is all about the gameplay, and the story's kind of cool. But for the most part, RPGs are just so paper thin when it comes, and they should be because they're not books. So,
well, in Star R, I do love 4X world building games. I'm not allowed to play them because when I start, I will not stop until I have taken over the world, which takes about 48 hours. And it's not okay.
I'm with you. And that is why I struggle. I love King's Crusade. Crusader Kings. I'm sorry, Crusader Kings. They have a Song of Ice and Fire mod. Oh, I love it. It's so fun. But I will sit there for 12 hours. I can't. I can't download it. I can't play it because I'll just lose all my time to it.
I think I have the one I have. It's not Civilization, but it's close to it. It's a fantasy version. It's so cool. It's like Endless Legend or something. It's a 4X game. It's cheaper than Civilization, and I've played it all the way through 3 times, which is hours of my life I will never get back. And then there's like a sim game called RimWorld, I think, where you're like people that crash. Hours of my life gone.
So you like the system management stuff. Yeah
So I can't play those because I don't have that type of time.
Yeah, I love the company that makes Crusader Kings also has a sci-fi version, and like the games are full-time jobs. Like they're so in depth, and they have an Expanse mod where you get to play in the Expanse, and I'm like, I want it. But I know I just can't do it.
The weird game that I played growing up, though, like I like World of Warcraft, but I never got like super into it, and I'm like I got scared of doing dungeons with strangers, so I like level up till you go to dungeons, and then I like kind of stop. But before that, Toontown was a thing when I was growing up, and I played so much Toontown because my grandma could play it because it was simple enough. You just walked and you clicked things for battles, and like we played so much of that. I have so many memories of playing Toontown at like 6 a.m. with my grandma before school. Like we would go and say, we need to find this type of monster to finish this task. It was very quest driven and it was super fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But I get very hyper focused, and I'm like, I need to be hyper focused on things that don't take 40 hours.
Yes.
Which a book usually the longest book is usually like 20 hours.
Yeah, that's actually true. If you think about the hours that you put in, that's a good way to put it. Have you ever played
like a Stormlight is about 20 hours. Same with a Malazan.
Yeah. So. Have you ever played Stardew Valley? I feel like you would love Stardew Valley.
I tried to get into it. I got like the cheap version for my iPad, and I don't dislike it, but it's one of those games where I need to sink more time into it to be into it, because like it's very open world, and sometimes if you're too open world, I get overwhelmed, and then I'm just like, because my brain is wrong, and my brain tells me there's a right way, and you've already done it wrong.
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so I don't dislike it, but I actually started playing that and Hades, which I do like Hades, when I was in a kind of a reading slump, and I'm like, I need something else to do, and that like helped with my entertainment part of my brain.
Yeah.
Because Hades, you're supposed to be bad. You're supposed to die.
I don't like repetition like that. So I actually, Hades was fun for about an hour for me. And then I was like, okay.
But it's not, okay. I mean, it is repetitious, but like it's a different map each time, and you can use different I have fun.
Oh, no, it's a phenomenal game. You'll get no arguments from me. It's just for me personally, I've never been a big fan of like the runs, like the run games.
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because so many of the greatest games are like that. And Hades has such a cool aesthetic, and like the story's actually
The music's
excellent.
really nice. Yeah.
It's just
And
an amazing game.
and considering I'm pretty sure it was a game created with no crunch, which is like phenomenal in this day and age.
Oh, what's up, Pat? What's up, everybody? I'm late to the party. Was reading all night to finish Rhythm of War. I was gonna say, and so Angela, as someone that does science all the time, did you like Rhythm of War?
So much. I have my spoiler vlog of Rhythm of War is me going, oh my gosh, guys, let me tell you what this is based off of because I'm geeking out and I'm going to predict this is how she's going to solve this problem. And I was right. And
Oh, really?
yeah.
That's awesome.
No, it was so cool. Like I could see the framework and like, it's obviously not completely one-to-one, but I was like, because you've read Rhythm of War, I'm not going to spoil it, but I can be vague. And okay. So like when she's working with the person to like make a thing she shouldn't, I'm like, ooh, I understood how it was going to be like waves in our world and like how we would solve that problem. And I was right. It was so cool.
That's awesome.
The grounding of the Stormlight Archive specifically, it's technically the whole Cosmere, but specifically the Stormlight Archive in fundamental physics is my favorite thing.
Yeah, my Way of Kings review, I pointed out, I love the fact that they were doing experiments with Stormlight that kind of resembled like particles and waves and
There's
everything.
Quantum mechanics in Way of Kings.
Yeah.
He perfectly describes quantum mechanics with Spren. I can't even.
I loved Rhythm of War, my new favorite Stormlight book, probably a top 3 book of 2021.
It's so hard for me to decide if it's actually going to be a favorite. Like, it was really good. Like, I don't love Oathbringer that much. It's okay. I mean, I like it way more in Reread, but when I first read Oathbringer, I was fatigued. I was like, this is a very long book.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is a lot. But Words of Radiance traditionally is my favorite because I remember reading the last 300 pages of it in my bedroom in college. When I woke up, I forgot to eat breakfast or get ready for the day. I had to finish the book. And I'm not a fast reader. I mean, a Stormlight book, maybe I do 40 pages an hour.
I feel like I read Stormlight pretty quickly.
No, I mean, I read it in the summer between my undergrad semesters, so I had time.
You know, I say that, but Way of Kings, I think I read over like a month and a half because I was moving. And I think that's why I enjoyed Way of Kings so much. For me, I liked Words of Radiance, Way of Kings, which that gap's actually gotten a lot closer after I've sat on it a while. Oathbringer, which I think it's kind of not soured, but like I don't love it as much as I did when I first read it. And then I didn't like Rhythm of War very much. I went from like mixed on Rhythm of War to, I'd say mostly positive, to more mixed as time has went on, which is interesting because I like quantum mechanics is awesome. I love physics. I watch physics videos in my free time all the time.
I think the fourth book is so in general, like the person who's excited to read it because of what we're talking about, then I think you will generally like the world building stuff. Because what I learned with Leanna is she didn't like the cultural world building, and she does have good critiques on the lack of consistent cultural world building in the world and why certain decisions are made and certain actions people take.
Yes.
And stuff. But the actual physical world building, like the evolution of plants and the science of it, is very well grounded and really cool. So if that's where you like your focus, that'll be cool. But as each book goes on, like Oathbringer is the definition of a bridge book. It needs to connect what happened in the first two, what's going to happen in books 4 and 5, and you can feel it. Mm-hmm. And then book 4, the people who love it love the Cosmere and love everything in Sanderson. And the people who are more lukewarm on it are like, well, I wasn't here for the Cosmere. I was here because I actually really liked these character studies, and the character studies are the weakest in the 4th book, I think.
Yeah. And then some people probably would say, well, no, they're my favorite. You know, I'm sure there's
yeah, but that's like if I had to generalize all of the thoughts I have heard.
Right.
That's my, and you know, everyone's an individual.
Yeah. I think we got to put that out there. Yeah. I was talking to Lost in Discovery today, Christian, and I was actually saying, I'm curious to see how I feel about Stormlight on a reread. And I'm very curious. Mostly I'm curious to see how I feel about Rhythm of War. I think for me, I was just a little bit burnt out because I read all 4 in a row. And I wish I had taken a break. I wish I would have taken a break after Words of Radiance, but I didn't. So maybe the reread will be a little bit more of an enriched experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, I told Andy to not read Rhythm of War because he was getting burnt out on it and he didn't like Oathbringer. And I'm like, yeah, you just wait. The book will still be there. Like, we have plenty of time.
Yeah.
Hello. Spain is lovely. I don't know where you are in Spain, but I got to go once and your country is phenomenal. Like, I loved it. Great food, great people. Didn't make fun of us too much for messing with the Euros in a very incoherent manner. Like we amused them, but it wasn't like you didn't feel like someone was sticking your nose up at you.
Yeah.
So
I speaking of like Cosmere, Lost in Discovery's videos, and he hasn't posted for a while, but man, nothing gets me. Have you ever watched his videos?
I don't think so. I don't watch a lot of Sanderson content, actually. I like to just live in my own head.
Well, that's fair. Oh my God, though. Some of the videos that he's made, they're so well edited. Like they're fantastic viewing experiences.
Oh, wow.
Are you familiar with like Alt Shift X?
No.
Okay. So Alt Shift X is like the biggest Game of Thrones YouTuber of all time. In my opinion, he's the best YouTuber ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Lost in Discovery was like becoming that for the Cosmere.
Oh, okay.
And he has posted, well, I think he's taking a break or something, and whatnot. And I talk to him like every day, but, man, his video, just as someone who enjoys Stormlight, if you ever get the itch to watch some content, I'm telling you, Lost in Discovery is just a great human being. And he has an Australian accent. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I love Cosmere things. And like, you know how like some things you die on hills of for some stuff, like people always dislike Mistborn Era too. I don't know why. I mean, people.
Yeah.
In general, if you averaged everyone's favorite Cosmere list, you don't find Mistborn Era 2 at the top.
Yeah.
Just that doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
And everyone's always like, it's nothing like the first trilogy, and it's too light, and it's too like it's just like too like surface level or shallow, I think is a common complaint. And I'm like, you guys don't even know when Alloy of Law came out. Alloy of Law wasn't supposed to happen. He was writing Memories of Light or something, and suddenly, randomly, we got Alloy of Law, and we were so happy. We were like, what? We weren't supposed to get a book for like 3 more years, and it was great. And I don't love Mistborn Era 2 as much as everything else, but it does actually have one of my favorite characters. It is actually when I learned that I actually, am on like the spectrum in some way and have some anxiety disorders is through one of the characters in his books.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it was a character that you really take a 180 on. It's a character that you meet and you don't know a lot about. And you're just like, why are you the way you are? And then as she's incorporated into the story more, you're like, oh, I am very much this person.
I mean, this is a prime example of how, when people say fiction is a waste of time, it certainly is not, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this has happened to me multiple times. Like, I mean, I will probably never be diagnosed as officially on the spectrum or with any official disorder or anything like that. But it's like, I hyper identify with a lot of characters that I've learned since being on booktube are autistically coded characters. And I'm just like, yeah, interesting. Like it's whatever. It's just like, it's interesting.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. I think of some of the characters that I've seen that are supposed to represent somebody on the spectrum, and John Gwynne did it in the sequel trilogy in the Banished Land saga, and I thought he did an excellent job. And then I actually didn't notice, and Alan told me this, and now that he said it, I'm seeing it all over the place, is Stannis Baratheon is supposed to possibly be on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And when Alan like painted it out for me, I was like, this is wild. I didn't even see it.
Well, and I've been rewatching the TV show Bones for like the 5th or 7th time in my life because I love it for some reason. I don't usually like procedural drama detective shows, but Bones speaks to me. And the character of Bones herself is supposed to be on the spectrum. And my mom is literally like told me I'm like her like my whole life in terms of like way too logical things go over my head. Like, I don't think I mask as much as most people, but I have had to train myself to learn certain social cues and like figure out what's a joke, or I'm incredibly gullible. Like certain things I won't catch up right away and I'll just like laugh it off because like whatever. But like,
yeah. So does that make it hard? Do you feel pressure or how does that feel whenever you're putting yourself on video and doing your channel?
I mean, it's okay when I'm editing because I get to see how it is. And like, I actually have a friend, her name is Alyssa Starrett. She has a channel and she explains it well too, is like when you're on the spectrum, there's certain ways in which it's hard for you to interact and things. Mm-hmm. And for her, video is actually one way she likes to express and doesn't feel weird for her. And I think that's probably similar for me. For me, it is more when I'm live and I can't correct myself or I can't make sure I've curated my thoughts appropriately, because then it triggers like my social anxiety of like, is someone going to take it this way? Or like, was I too blunt? It usually happens with bluntness because I forget that sometimes you're supposed to like not say exactly what you're thinking. You're supposed to, curve the edges a little bit.
Yeah.
So it doesn't normally happen with videos because I like doing it and you get practice and stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't, like I said, though, I don't want to say that I've been officially diagnosed or anything. It's just like I have found many connections with characters that have been coded that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's immensely important. And Andrew's Widgely reads, yes, we are. We were talking about the spectrum and people on it and how they interact and characters that have also represented that. It's interesting because I feel better like this live. And I know I say things that are incorrect sometimes. I mean, I get I get things wrong all the time, or I'm probably gonna watch back that OneRing.net rant and be like, hey, that was too mean.
Oh, here, let me tell you, it wasn't that mean at all.
Yeah, I know. I felt like I kind of hyped it up like I was going to go off, but like I'm not one to like insult people. Like I'm fine with just like criticizing like ideas and stuff, but like I guess that's probably different than what people are expecting when they hear a rant. But videos, I always feel like I could have added more. I said the wrong thing, and I kind of obsess over my videos in that regard, and I find myself like not liking many of the videos I end up posting because of that. Like I feel like I could have elaborated more or something, but in this I can go back and correct myself. I can elaborate. I can kind of I can work my thoughts out as I go. And maybe that's because whenever I do my videos, I usually have notes, and I'm not reading off a script, but I do have notes, and maybe like my brain, just to like get across that note, I don't elaborate as much as I should. And sometimes it can really, really bother me. Also, Baron, thank you. Said you were amazingly articulate. I can't even compute. Nah, that's coming from Baron, who's Mr. One Take. If you've ever watched Your Brain on Books, he does a one take through the whole thing, and he speaks so well. I'm so jealous.
It's also like, I mean, I'm sure even he experiences this, but some days if I film, I'm like, oh, I only have to cut out like one thing. Like there was like one pause where I had to look down. This was great. Awesome. Other days I'm pausing like every 2 minutes and I'm just like, who am I? Why can't I talk today?
I totally understand. And when I come upstairs from filming, I film down here in the basement. Wife will be like, good or bad? I'm like, it was bad. I didn't have it today, or it was good. And some days I know how to talk better than others, I think. But I've always found my reviews that are on the camera, if the raw footage is 15 minutes or less, I did a great job because I didn't have to sit there and like cut and think. Whenever the raw footage for just a review is like 20 to 30 minutes, it means that I probably didn't do I don't think I did a great job of articulating myself. But I remember, I think it was my Paranesi review I did. I think the raw footage was like 11 minutes, maybe it's 12. And I was just like, oh, that's not very long. But I realized I didn't have to cut very much. And I was like, that was great. That was my best. If only all of them felt that good.
Well, and then like sometimes like I'm not so like Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, yes?
Yeah, she's on the show.
She like talks about how like when she does bad takes, she like starts over from the beginning, and she'll have like an hour that she cuts down to like 12 or whatever.
That's what Andrew said he does here too. Yeah,
and like sometimes I'll do that if it's early in the video. Like if I'm doing a wrap up and I've only wrapped the first and second book in 10 books and I didn't like what was happening, or I had to take a cat out of the room and there were too many disruptions. I'm like,
I lock my cats out. They gotta
I usually do. Sometimes they're good. I don't know. It depends. It's a lot of work. But regardless, sometimes I will restart if it's that early. If I'm late in the video, I'm just like, screw it. We're going. People will get what they get. Because as long as I don't feel like I've like put something harmful into the universe, like that's never the goal, right?
Yeah.
Like I know people appreciate when things are more genuine or organic versus to being like so scripted it feels fake. And I'm like, well, this is where my brain was today. And the people who follow me, they give me grace. So
I'll tell you what, man. So I started reviewing manga on the channel, which I'm sure like half the viewers just moaned, but I'm really enjoying it. And it's like a totally different like group. I mean, there's some crossover, but it's a different group of viewers. And man, they are sharp. Like they get in the comment, hey, you forgot this on this page, and not in a mean way though, in a very kind way, where they're like, hey, this is why this resonated with me. I wish you would have mentioned it. And through that, I've actually like got more out of the material, which is really cool. But with books, I feel like people, people know that the range of emotions are so different for each different moment, especially the tomes we read, right? Like 1,000-page Stormlight book, you're going to point out things and I'm going to point out things. That's why we have a lot of the same videos out and people watch all of them, right?
Yeah.
With manga, that's not the case. There's not as much material in like one volume, right? So like people kind of laser focus on these big things. And I do think that it's a little bit more obvious what the big moment is in manga. And that's not to say that that's bad. That's just how the medium is. And I found that I have to really cross my T's and dot my I's if I want to, make them happy, which is not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think it keeps me on my toes. But it's interesting seeing those two different, the contrast between the two different mediums. Do you ever read any manga or no?
I've read some. I actually read one recently because of a thing that I was doing for a Secret Santa thing that's going up on Monday. Mm-hmm. But in general, I'm really bad at reading with pictures, mainly because I am bad at looking at the pictures, which is where most of the story is.
Very important.
Yeah. But actually, for my birthday, I was given 2 copies of a Buffy graphic novel. And I know these aren't manga, but
yeah, I saw you had that.
And then I got more. I got the Jemison bind-up of their Green Lantern comics. So they have 12 Green Lantern volumes that were in a bind-up that was released. So I'm really excited, and the art's really cool in them.
Awesome.
And like, I've read manga in high school. I dated someone. They read manga.
You handed them Mistborn.
Yeah, no, I think they didn't start reading Sanderson until after we had broken up, but they did read it because of me. And like, I think part of the thing that was hardest for them when we broke up, because they didn't want to talk to me, was they didn't have anyone to talk to about Sanderson, which I would have accepted it. It's just, they needed boundaries, and I respect that.
Yeah, that's fair. Tell them to get on BookTube. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, well, and it's just like, I love how many of my friends who aren't on the book internet who read Sanderson, like that's where I go if I need to get away from like the critiques of Sanderson, yes, which like they're all valid, but then I just go to my friends and we just talk about how much we love Adolin. Like
I've talked about this before, and A Song of Ice and Fire is very, very near to my heart. I don't have almost any A Song of Ice and Fire content here on the channel because it's so near and dear to me. I'm not really interested in having the conversation of whether it's good or not because I know what I feel, right? So a lot of times I go and I'm a subscriber, like to my friend Matt, who's on here on Bend the Knee, their podcast. I go into their Patreon hangouts and stuff, and that's where I get my fix for A Song of Ice and Fire. First Law is also kind of in that realm. Like I go somewhere else for my First Law enjoyment, because the discussion around whether it's garbage or not is not all that interesting at this point to me, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's partially, I mean, I do make some Sanderson videos when I like want to talk about it, but also it's just like, I'm not here to tell you my first time experience, so no one cares about that. It's like my 5th time experience. Like I love it. It's great. But like I was happy when I did finally get to like do new Sanderson with my Rhythm of War vlog, which I'm just glad exists for me and me reacting to every moment. And yes, Adolin he's like a German Shepherd Golden Retriever mix of a person. If Sanderson does something to my boy, I'm gonna be so mad. Everyone else is allowed to die. I don't care.
Not Adolin.
Well, I mean, I do think there are good critiques about him as a character of privilege and, how he responds to other characters who are of a lower class and stuff. But I do just love his interactions with other people. And I do think him as a character, his goal is to try and be his best, which I think is admirable regardless of your background. So, I don't know. I like him a lot. I think he's cool. He's great. It wasn't until Oathbringer that I realized he was my favorite, though. I was like thrown that suddenly he was my favorite.
Well, it's certainly a series where you can connect with different characters, right? I mean, there's just such a big cast and there's a lot of care put into them. So I think everyone has.
I will never talk to Elliot about Adolin. I will never. Those are the only parts of her videos I skip. I cannot watch her hate Adolin. I skip them.
Do not watch my Stormlight videos.
I won't. It's okay.
Please don't.
He's just a good boy. He's just a good boy.
Oh man, yeah. Talking to you and also talking to Christian recently, it makes me like really want to reread Stormlight. I'm not going to because book 5 will be out before we know it.
Just wait till book 5, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take my time with it this time. I also think that like my stamina for reading is way higher than it used to be. Like a lot of people are like, man, you're cruising through Malazan, which I actually don't think I am, to be honest. Like I think a book a month is more than reasonable.
It depends on where you're at. It depends on,
well, your schedule even, right? For me right now, like a Malazan book a month's nothing. which I'm glad. I'm glad that that's the case. But a lot of people say, "Oh, I'll take a break here and here." I just like, and I haven't read one in like 3 weeks, and I'm getting the itch. I'm like, I kind of want to get back in there. I want to get back in the ring with Erickson and duke it out with his ideas and his writing and the mystery behind it all. Like, I just find myself craving Malazan, and I don't think I would have been that reader a year ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely some, like, my commute, reading on my commute, and also I joined a non-sci-fi fantasy book club.
Cool.
And so I was purposely joining a thing where I was going to read books that were not fantasy sci-fi. So reading those books that are all over the place in terms of writing style, themes, settings, everything. And then also having my commute where, like, I had nothing to do. I literally just had 30 minutes and I was going to just read what I could. I didn't have other distractions. Made me such a more focused reader, which helped because I wasn't a very focused reader. It wasn't till then, and I know this is blasphemy, but like it wasn't until I was like 23 that I finally was able to read and complete Lord of the Rings. Up until that point, I had tried so many times, but I didn't have the focus for his writing style because it's not a modern writing style. I wouldn't say it's dense, but it meanders in a way that I didn't find compelling until I had learned to appreciate some of that through other fiction that I had read.
Yeah.
Is what I would say. I mean, still not for me a favorite of all time, but I appreciate it. I think it's important. And I'm glad I now could read it. And I actually like his battle scenes. I thought they were very good, but no one talks about them. So maybe I'm just like the only person.
No, Tolkien, I love Tolkien, but it's a mood thing for me. And that goes for a lot of stuff that's published before 1980. I have to be in a mood to read those things. And I don't think that that's a bad thing at all. At all. I've had non-readers try to argue with me, like, the movies are better than the books. I'm like, okay, probably. Like, I don't necessarily get dogmatic about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, I have a friend who it's their like favorite nostalgia thing of all time. And like, that's fantastic.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, we all with fantasy without Tolkien, I don't know where we are. We probably would still have fantasy in a form, but it would be different.
It'd be very different. Actually, what do you think? So, we look back at Tolkien now, and a lot of people say like it's hard to read and such. And I feel like that's already kind of happening with older works like Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and even A Song of Ice and Fire to an extent. And I think in 30 years, the people will look back on those works and be like, yeah, those are a little hard to get through. Like, where does it go? Because I don't think it stops. Like, I think eventually people might even look back at things like what Jemison has written or Sanderson, and they might say,
people already think Jemison's too hard to read, which is weird because it's so good.
Oh my God. Broken Earth's one of the best trilogies ever written.
It is. And someone was asking me for what to read after that. If you like it, I'm like, there's nothing else like it. I just read more Jemison. Like, I didn't know what to do.
Oh man, Jemison's phenomenal. I really want to get to more of her works as well. But like, do you think like what is language and like the evolution of storytelling? And it's not always an evolution. It is also a more accessible dumbing down. Yeah. And when you say that, people get upset. But it's
I prefer to say simple sentence structure. I think it annoys people less.
That's fine. I don't mind annoying people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm one of the people who likes the direct writing style,
which is fine. No, that's fine. So
I don't know. Well, so I think. Because I was thinking about this earlier today because Michael Knipp had a video, but I wasn't thinking about it in terms of writing style. It's what resonates with people at a time. And I think you're right. Attention spans are short. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they are going to be getting longer. But I don't necessarily means that means writing keeps getting to a point. Like, there will always be books that are incredibly accessible to everyone. We have Dan Brown. We have Sarah J. Maas. Like, we have incredibly accessible books that are already like really quick, snappy sentences. But I think what's more likely to happen is just what always happens where people think, well, this isn't interesting anymore. I've seen this all before. This is derivative. Like it's already happening with Sanderson. Like, like where people who read Sanderson for the first time don't feel the magic that other people did when Sanderson, was driving the helm of, more strict magic systems. Mm-hmm. Strict magic systems come in and out. Some people use them, some people don't. But now it's not a cool thing. It's not a new thing. So I think that's more likely to happen. But I don't know, like, because I feel like Jane Austen's a good example of this, where she has a really nice, accessible writing style, but she's also a classic, right? She wrote a long time ago. But
I mean, Hobb I think Hobbs
Yeah.
accessible.
Oh, and
but
Hobbs very
beautiful.
accessible and also somehow very beautiful. I think when you read Kingkiller, you'll probably notice a similar thing where it's very, I wouldn't say purple, but it's very lyrical prose.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I had read Kingkiller at the time, I'd only really read Sanderson, and I was like, how am I liking this more than a Sanderson book? I feel like I'm cheating. Like, now plot wise, I don't love it more, but like the writing was just like, how are you making me interested about this very mundane thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know, but I mean, it's definitely going to be for popular fiction. It's always going to be what is the most accessible, and right now, the most accessible is the one that requires the least amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't fault people. Some people only have like 2 hours a week to read, and they don't necessarily have the brain power to like be philosophizing. But I don't think that means we lose the other books. They just never become popular. Like they're not winning the Goodreads Choice Awards.
No,
like,
they'll exist. You know what I think it is? I think that the next trend, and this is a crappy opinion from a very small booktuber, I think serial installments of series that are larger but in smaller doses are going to become more and more popular. I think of Cradle by Will White, and or is it what is that series called? Is it Cradle? Someone
I think
correct.
it's Cradle. That's what I know it as. I haven't read it, but the first book's Unsold, right?
Yeah, and I know it's like I think it's at least somewhat kind of like a lit RPG, but I don't necessarily mean exactly that structure, but how that is short installments that are released very frequently in like a serial way almost. Yeah, it's Cradle. Thank you. I think that is going to be a very hot trend, at least for a moment in the coming future, where you still get these big epic, stories that overarch and go all these long places. Honestly, kind of like manga in comic books. Like
I think that's already happened, and I don't think it. Maybe you're arguing the popularization of it, but urban fantasy has had that down forever.
Well, no, yeah, for sure. I mean, Dresden could probably be thrown into the.
I mean,
to
Dresden.
hat,
The only
right?
reason it's not in that list right now is because he had that writer's block for so long, but he used to like snap him out 1 or 2 a year.
Yeah, and now they're getting bigger too, right? Like he's getting more epic, which is really amazing.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
also,
I haven't read past book 4, but like my stepdad loves Dresden, so
yeah, and I think what he's done is, and I've only read book 1. Thought it was okay. Thought it was good. But I think that if you do that, if you put out 10 books that are very digestible and you earn the trust of your reader, and then you say, by the way, I'm going to end this with an epic trilogy that's huge, people will be more willing to spend the time reading your tomes. If you've already earned that. And like, I think Sanderson to a degree is, Elantris was a standalone. You have Warbreaker as a standalone. Mistborn book 1 by itself is just a great book. Right. So I think that like he earned favor with his audience and then has his long form fantasy that, everyone that's a fan of him trust. So, and that's just a prediction. And like you said, it's already happening, but I really mean like a very popular trend, like outside of urban fantasy, but just like, maybe fiction in general, but really fantasy as well. And I could see that maybe happening, but I'm probably wrong, to be honest.
The weird thing about trends, because Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany was reading a new book. I think it's a tour release next year that I'm interested in because she's having a lot of fun with it. And she's like, I think this is like has potential to be one of the next big name authors we talk about. I'm like, that's so interesting because you really have to wait 5 or 10 years before you know that. Like, it really doesn't happen. I mean, it's very rarely do you have a Rothfuss. Like, Sanderson wasn't even Rothfuss level of, like, one-hit wonder out the wazoo.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Sanderson, Mistborn almost ruined his career. That story is so interesting when he tells it. Because everyone wanted the sequel to Elantris. And he wrote Mistborn. And then they didn't have as many pre-orders, which is how back then publishing lived or died by. It still does now, but it's a different world than 2007, right?
Yeah.
And then... so they didn't print as many Well of Ascension, and then they sold out of Well of Ascension, and it was only because of the fan base. But, like, he almost tanked his career by just choosing to write a different story that is now, like, his bread and butter. Like, I think of all of his works, that's the most accessible and the most popular. Like, I
mean, it's also really interesting that, like, for instance, like George Martin got so popular off his fantasy series whenever he's truly more of a horror and a sci-fi author. Now, like I said, he thinks they all live in the same realm, but his passion, he loves sci-fi. He wrote for the Twilight
I've been wanting to read his sci-fi because I didn't dislike his writing style. I just was uninterested in what he wanted to talk about, which is not his fault. It was my fault.
My soul.
I mean, it's just...
I'm kidding.
It's just... I love the first 3 Song of Ice and Fire books. I really love them. 4 and 5, it meanders a bit. It's a little Uncharted.
Yeah, we'll see how I feel on this reread. I've always liked them. I'm really excited to go into it with a little bit of a different view from how I've grown over the last like year, because I definitely felt that with A Feast for Crows, but I think this time when I go through, especially after reading Malazan, like I feel like I'm a little more susceptible to pondering than I was before. But we'll see. I don't know.
I think for me, it's more. I don't mind authors who don't outline. I really don't. Especially since I don't know how every author creates a work. Like, not everyone's forthcoming about their process.
Yeah.
But if I can notice that we're kind of just seeing where things are going and we don't have a plan, or we have plans, but we don't really know what we're doing, and I can feel he's written himself into corners. I mean, I feel like that's why we don't have Winds for Winter. I don't like when I can notice and it takes me out of the story a little bit.
I would honestly ask, though, do you feel like you know that because you know it? Because he's talked about it? Because if he had never talked about it, I don't think
he talks
you would
about in
know.
his process when he writes that he has some large points, but the journey happens when he's sitting at his desk. So
right.
I guess what I'm saying. I know that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, if you didn't know that, I don't know if you would notice.
Oh, I noticed. I'm like, people cannot be getting this far apart. You have to come together. And so I read book 4 freshman in college. I was working at the Science Center, and I was like, why are we doing all of this? And then I read Dance of Dragons 2 years later, and I was just like, why are we so far apart? And it wasn't until years after that I read about his writing process. But I felt very like, where are we going? Do you know where we're going? And then the longer we had without Winds of Winter, I was just like, okay, I felt like you were writing into corners, because I hate stories where we just keep separating our point of views. I don't mind it if it's temporary, but it has never, we only ever had our characters together in like the first book.
How do you feel about Malazan?
Malazan's different because it's finished. And I think that's the thing with, if A Song of Ice and Fire was finished, I could reorient myself. I could reframe it, because then I could see what happens. I have heard nothing but amazing things about the Crippled God, so I'm okay with it. Also, I don't know. I think I was prepared for each book to be its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's not like I was given a family unit with really cute dogs that we underutilize and then separate them to the corners of the world.
Oh, Nelzar said, I'd rather be traveling with Jamie through the Riverlands at A Feast for Crows than be reading engineering class with Navani in every chapter.
First of all, it's not every chapter, but I mean, to each their own. I actually don't mind the Jamie chapters. I minded the Brenneth of Tar. What's her name?
Brienne.
She literally kept thinking the same thing. I haven't read this book for like 10 years, but all I remember is her being like, my duty, my responsibility. Oh my God, I'm failing. I'm like, get it together.
I remember not thinking her chapters were the best. I'm excited to see them on a reread and see what I think this time on them. I love the Jamie. No, I mean, I think Jamie chapters are incredible.
Well, and I think there was something really intriguing in Feast for Crows, but it was a classic, let's make it cool. And then, of course, this plan's going to burn up in flames. So watch it crumble. Which, again, if there was an ending, I could go through all of this and experience it and know, like,
well, yeah, endings are important to you, like you said.
Yeah, so, and like, I think that's why with Malazan, I knew it going in that it's very disjointed in its storytelling. And I knew that's its project, and it feels, and I know it's partially based off this, like Greek tellings. Like, you have this larger than life story of these gods and different tiers of gods, and it's just, its scope is wide. And I honestly don't mind that each book's kind of a different focus, but I knew that going in. Whereas with A Song of Ice and Fire, initially I thought it was a family drama about kingdoms, and it kind of is that, but it's something else. And also, the first chapter is really cool, and we really don't discuss the prologue of A Game of Thrones enough, and how it's just dropped off and it doesn't get discussed a lot in the books, and it just makes me sad. It's so cool.
I definitely, I saw it when we did the discussion for A Game of Thrones. I brought it up and I said how it's like one of my favorite prologues of all time.
It's such a good prologue.
It establishes so much stuff right out the get-go. It's very, very good.
So I think my lukewarm feelings are that there's a lot of stuff I like, but I didn't like it enough to keep waiting. So, like, when everyone started to be disappointed in the show, I'm like, well, I'm just here. I'm just here for an ending. I don't really actually care about the execution anymore. Maybe I'll get an ending. Maybe I won't. But it was never my favorite thing. So I wasn't like a diehard fan who was like disappointed.
Right. That's probably kind of how I feel with the Wheel Time show, or most other fantasy things, I think.
But I mean, I do agree that it does what I think a Song of Ice and Fire does what it wants to do really well, and I respect that. I wish he wasn't so rich. I think books get written quicker when you don't have money, and I know that's horrible. It's a horrible way to
No,
think.
it happens to fighters all the time. I'm a huge MMA fan. This happens to fighters all the time. It's
Yeah.
a lot harder to go get into an 8-week camp to get in a fist fight in your underwear in front of 20,000 screaming drunk people whenever you're sitting on 100 million in the bank.
Yeah. Like in theory, I actually want all artists to, be paid to live while they create. Like that's actually what I believe in. But I just know that like if he needed, to be an author full time to have money, like he just doesn't need that now with his royalties, which I respect. Like he's been a writer for so much longer than before A Song of Ice and Fire. Like
Yeah.
he's allowed. It's just it would be cool to see his vision completed because it's obviously a very grand vision.
Yeah, for sure. and it's set so many trends in the genre too.
Yeah.
And been such a big influence. One book that you said you're going to read this year and you didn't. And I have to ask you, what are you doing? You haven't read Malice.
That's true. I was supposed to read it in 2020.
I feel like you're really going to like it. Like after talking
I think
to
I
you,
am. Yeah.
I think it's going to be right up your alley.
I mean, and some people will say this is an arbitrary thing that I do, and why do you do it? It doesn't matter. But I think it's important that when I'm trying to balance my diverse reads, I don't have a strict number. It's not a number quota game, but I only let myself read so many series by white popular authors at once, because otherwise I like to finish series. I will have a month where it's only white male authors because I'm trying to like Wheel of Time, Malazan. I'm not finishing those anytime soon. I was reading The Witcher for a long time. Like I had a lot of series like that I needed to wrap up. And the plan was to finish The Witcher and start Malice. But I think Live Ship Traders got in the way somehow.
Well, that's an acceptable substitute. I'll take it.
Yeah. And then like, I think just what also happens with me that I need to course correct. No, I'm excited for Malice. I think it's going to be like right up my alley.
It's also quick, like
fast. I'm really really excited. But what happens to me every fall and winter is I read too much fantasy compared to my other genres.
Yeah, like you read a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so normally I read 2 to 4 sci-fi books a month, and then the rest is usually fantasy and maybe one contemporary literary fiction historical. I read about 10 books a month, give or take, plus or minus 2 in air. And lately it's been like 1 sci-fi a month because all I've been doing is finishing series and binging because fantasy is so cozy and it's like cozy times. So I also need to get back into sci-fi, but Malice is going to happen and I want to read it. I mean, so here's the thing. Here's where my struggle is. The sequel for Shadow of the Gods cover was released. It looks really good.
Yeah, I personally love the cover. I will say this as a John Gwynne stan. The Hunger of the Gods is a title. I'm not sure if I like the title as much as I like the Shadow of the Gods.
At least it's consistent. I can go on a whole rant about how fantasy book titles are just bad and I hate them all.
Yeah,
They're all repetitive.
I mean, that's certainly fair. It's of the or
yeah. It's all like some of them are good. But some of them, like, I love Jemison. Her Inheritance Trilogy. First of all, why is it called the Inheritance Trilogy? We already have the Inheritance cycle. I can't do this. But it's like 100,000 Kingdoms, the Broken Kingdom, the Kingdom of Gods. And I'm like, oh my goodness, no. I hate all of this. I hate this all. And like some authors lean into it, like Sarah J. Maas has a blank of blank and blank. Like,
right.
But
I mean, I won't knock anyone for consistency's sake. Like, Shadow of the Gods to Hunger of the Gods. I get it. And the covers are also like going to
I like the big MIG monsters and the little people.
I'm in for that. And so the name's fine. It's just when I first read the Hunger of the Gods, I almost felt like it was like, I don't know, like what is it going to be about a chef? Like I don't know exactly where that's going to end up, but I know it's not that, so it's fine.
I mean, the Hunger of the Gods, it's the demand for sacrifice.
Well, certainly,
I think of.
Certainly. But I hear hunger. I think Hunger Games. It gets me off track, unfortunately.
Oh gosh, yeah. Someone's not talking about Realm of the Elderlings title. It's like, oh my goodness.
Oh, they're the worst in the biz. They're the worst in the business.
Terrible. Oh, and the fact that you can only purchase them in the United States in mass market paperback. It's just so horrible.
I ordered mine all from Book Depository and waited the 2 weeks because I was like, I can't do it.
I haven't decided yet. I bought special. I found used hardbacks of Live Ship because I like them enough. And I think the 80s art on that, even though it's a 90s book, I get that, but it's very 80s fantasy art was really pretty. Like, I
Mhm.
thought it was actually really cool seeing Vivacia and Peregrine and the serpents and stuff. I thought that was really cool on those covers. I don't hate the UK covers. I just think they're uninspired in comparison, and I'm always nervous about the binding being so tight. But I since reading the Winnowing Flame series, which is also a UK binding, I think it could be floppier than I think for the smaller books. So I might, if I like Fool's Errand a lot, get that.
Yeah, the spines on these UK editions are the best spines I've ever had in a softback.
Yeah, no.
There's
So
not
sometimes theirs are like super tight.
Yeah, there's not even a crease in any of them. And I read the hell out of those books. I actually have the Winnowing Flame trilogy, by the way, and I wanted you to kind of talk about it tonight because it's one of those things that a lot of people haven't really read, and it's something that Stuart, who's in chat, actually kind of intrigued me on, kind of, and it's something I'm going to read in 2022. So I'd love you to
Nice.
give me a little elevator pitch for it.
So I've only read the first 2 books. So I've only read Ninth Reign and Bitter Twins, but I'm reading the Poison Song in like a week. So I'm really excited. Okay. So this is, I would put it solidly into like, this is fun fantasy. Like, you're reading this for the adventure, for the camaraderie, for like the stakes, like the I don't know who's making it-ness of it all, and for the connections that happen. It's less about ideas. It's definitely way more about like people coming together to fight an antagonistic force. Now, the antagonistic force is kind of the land itself, which is always usually my favorite thing.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, and you jump into it kind of in their version of an apocalypse or post-apocalypse. And it's kind of like, it's nothing like the Prince of Nothing, but you know how the Prince of Nothing has a character race type that's like an elf, but it's very different.
Yes.
It has this type of twisting of races here where we have like an elf vampire type race that's important. You have humanoid creatures. It's has amazing animal companions. And the first book is very much your traditional first book in a series of like, what's our situation? What's going on? And then the end of it very much is like, where's the second book? I need it right now because we have just accelerated things to 11.
Right.
And then the second book is very much like, we are the Avengers, but we don't know how to be a team. How we do this.
Yeah, this sounds great. And Benjamin actually said it sounds like John Gwen. It does kind of sound like John Gwen.
No, it's very much, and like I instantly loved the chemistry of the characters with each other. I don't think they're like characters that are going to make people's top lists of all time, but they're really vibrant and fun, and it's LGBTQ friendly effortlessly. Like it's just a part of the world that people can be gay, can be straight, can be trans. It's just like there. It's not part of the thematic agenda.
It's a given, right?
It's just a thing, which I really appreciate that a lot of times. And like one of the main characters is like a 40-year-old Black woman scientist who like left her vineyard, which like how often do you have that as your adventurer? Like,
Yeah, not very often.
She's just like so sassy. So I instantly loved all the characters, and an ending of a book hasn't given me so much anxiety since the Bitter Twins. I had just, that like heart racing, like, I don't know what's going to happen. What's going on?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that describes Gwen's books. I was always very nervous as we get to the last 200 pages. I'm like, oh, please no. Please
yeah, I mean,
don't.
and there's character consistency. I think something that people haven't liked, but I thought was actually very consistent, is our characters are relatively selfish individuals, and you love them so much you forget that they're selfish. So when they act genuinely selfish, not like the fake you're told they're selfish sort of thing, it can throw you off. But I'm like, they're self-centered individuals. Of course they did this thing.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah, I'm really,
I read
really
the
excited to read
first
that.
book.
Oh, the Wayfarers series. Yeah, Amanda wanted to know if Angela had read Wayfarers, and you said you read the first book.
Correct. I read Becky Chambers before my time on BookTube. I've read her novella To Be Taught If Fortunate as well, and I like it, but it was a little bit too not plot at all for me in the first book.
Would you say that you like it to, like, it does seem like you really like the meandering in a book?
I do love the quiet moments in a book. Like that's why. So if I want something very plot driven, I watch a TV show or a movie. Like if I don't like reading action books as much as I like watching an action movie.
That's fair.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like that's just my preference. I learned that this year when I was trying to read some like action sci-fi thrillers where I'm like, this was quick technically, but like I would have rather like this have been like a Christopher Nolan film or something.
Right.
Like, like it's not technically bad. This is just not media for me for it. But I do love quiet moments with good character connection. And if you can combine that with some good action scenes, and we'll see if this works for you. I normally don't visualize things, but Jen Williams has some vibrant descriptions that I am just like, oh, I saw that creepy thing. And this action scene, I could see it's very cinematic. Like I could see the moving pieces. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. I'm excited and terrified for the Poison song. But this is actually, I wasn't going to read Winnowing Flame. I was going to read Malice, but then my Discord wanted to read Winnowing Flame.
And that was the wrap.
So, and I can only, like, I really only read so many series at once. It's not a quota thing. I just naturally only read so many series at once because that's just what happens on the TBR. Like,
yeah,
I'm faster than average reader, but I'm not like a mega reader. Like I don't do 300 books a year. You know, it's only so much you can do.
I don't know anyone doing 300. I'd like to meet them and shake their
hand. Oh,
hand.
I know them. They do a lot of audiobooks, and they typically, a lot of the books they read are short, quick reads that are in genre fictions like urban fantasy or romance and stuff. So it tends to help. Yes, that is great. It's great. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Winnowing Flame is definitely one of my most anticipated books. I'll probably be putting out a video in the coming weeks of like things I'm looking forward to reading in 2022.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's important to like know that it's an entertainment book. I think like it does discuss like every book, it has themes, but like, do I think about the themes? No, I'm just like, I hate this person. I like this person. I'm very stressed about this thing. I want these two people to get together. Like, I'm very just invested in the plot of it.
Yeah, I can enjoy a variety of things. Like I have preferences like every other person in the world, but like my top 10 list is such a mishmash of like heavily thematic books to popcorn fantasy to, just different things. And some of them are just pure character studies and whatnot. And I can appreciate a lot of different things.
Well, yeah. And like, it's kind of like, so very few people can do what I think that like Robin Hobb and now I guess Fonda Lee have done, where you have the perfect combination of like, this was entertaining, but also like so much more, like very rich.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Robin Hobb does some great Here Comes the Cavalry stuff that I'm just like, yes. Like,
yeah.
Fist pump in the air. Like, I'm here.
Fantasy. Yeah.
And I think you definitely still get those fist pump moments in Winnowing Flame. But I wouldn't say like the characters are remotely on the same level, but it's still very fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like the covers a lot. I think they're really pretty.
Yeah. When I got mine in the mail, I was like, these are good looking. And it sucks. They're in the bottom corner because they're W. I have it alphabetical. I'll show everyone when I do my book tour that I've been promising for 2 years that I haven't done. One day.
Alphabetical by series name. That is a messed up system.
Well, no, Jen Williams.
Oh.
So she's all the way she's down there with Evan Winter and Tad Williams. She's tucked away. And it's a shame because, well, Evan Winter's covers are also gorgeous, but hers, I don't know. They're different. They're very
really
different.
Nice. Someone is messed up. Like, I know like not everything in the UK gets published in the US, but just even as ebooks, they should be published here. Like,
yeah, and they're hard to find. They're not on Kindle.
You can't, because they literally do not have a publisher in the United States, and she does not self-publish them. She has a different series that she has had published, but they weren't picked up here. So you can't get the Kindle because we have really dumb electronic border laws. Yeah. And you can get the physical only by ordering it from a UK store. It's ridiculous.
Baron just said, don't even tease us on the tour. He's been around for a while. He's been hearing about this bookshelf tour I've been doing.
Also, Evie, I have no clue if you'll like it. I don't know. If you like The Mask of Mirrors, we'll discuss. I don't gatekeep for Evie, but I don't like when my friends read things that I like and they hate it. And Evie is one of my friends who does not like Brandon Sanderson, and we survive. And I think there were a couple series that she had read in DNF, and it's like, well, I could have told you would hate that. Why didn't you ask?
Well, some people like to test the waters, right? So.
Yeah, but like there are some things that like, you know how like if you like this, you'll like that. If the other, it works as well for if you don't like this, you won't like that. Like,
yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, there's people whenever people have like someone that like I don't necessarily agree with all their book opinions. We're still friends, but they'll say, "Oh, this book was like a 5-star," and I'm just like, that actually slid down a little bit. Like on my TBR, it slid down just a little bit. because
Yeah.
maybe I won't like it as much. Depends on why they liked it as well, because I can appreciate a book for different things. So
Yeah. Evie, read Winnowing Flame when you want to have fun. Actually, don't read Winnowing Flame. Read A Memory Called Empire, because goodness.
yeah, that's one I really want to get to as well. It's kind of got lost in the sci-fi shuffle because the number one series that I'm looking forward to, I guess this is semi-spoiler for the video I'll release, is Empire of Silence, aka Sun Eater by Christopher Rocchio. I'm so interested in reading that series. It's been
I want to read
recommended
it
to me.
too. Maybe we should buddy read that. I need a
I'm
reason.
starting soon.
Oh God, when is soon?
So it's supposed to be January, but I'm going to be honest. I think, and I know Scott, he's a friend of mine. He's going to be disappointed to hear, but I think I might have to wait till February or March because I think I need to finish Malazan or A Song of Ice and Fire first because those books are they're not short. Like the
I
Sun
can
Eater
start
books.
it probably February or March. I defend March 2nd.
I'll let you know.
Be calm. Be kind.
I will let you know whenever I decide to start
it stares at me at my library. We have the first book at my library, and every time I go sit in that corner to work on my thesis, I'm like, there it is.
I have the first three. I was kind of actually Baron gifted me the first book, which is very hard to find in hardback. Like it's very expensive, and he sent that to me. So Baron, thank you for that, by the way. But it's also my patron random wheel, so I could end up reading it in January because 2 people picked it, so it gets 2 picks on the spin. So if it happens, then there's nothing I can do. But it's the next series that I want to tackle, and I've been in a sci-fi mood. You know,
sci-fi is fun. I think I don't actually know why sci-fi is not that popular. I mean, in general, fantasy and sci-fi in the larger world of books are not that popular genre-wise. BookTube makes you think they are, but they're really not. Like if you look at Goodreads, how many ratings all those books get versus like popular literary fiction. Like it's really like.
Well, you know what it is? I think the lines of what is sci-fi are a lot harder than what is fantasy. Because you might ask some people, they say, Sarah J. Maas fantasy? I guarantee you can find an argument somewhere on the internet that she isn't actually fantasy and she's just romance, which isn't true. But
I mean, I would say that like it should. I've been on a lot of Goodreads videos lately. I would like a fantasy romance section.
Sure.
Because I think marketing wise, that's a useful tool.
Yeah.
Because someone who's looking for a romance with a fantasy setting is different than someone who's looking for a fantasy book with a strong romance. Like those are different books.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and we all know that it's a little bit annoying to always see that, right? You know.
I mean, I liked well enough A Court of Silver Flames. I have read it. I like Jimmy said, I read everything. I read all of the things.
You really do.
But the fantasy parts were not the good parts. I was actively angry about. It was like the definition of plot convenience and like walking back world building and magic powers. Like she makes her characters so powerful and then pretends that they can't get out of this situation. And then I'm like, you have never killed a character in your life. Don't pretend like you're going to do it now. Like,
oh, so yeah, I didn't know that there's a lot of plot armor. I'll be honest with you. I probably will try Sarah J. Maas at some point in my life, but it probably won't be in the next like 5 years because there's just too much for me to read.
Which one do I find most? Well, I don't actually know if you like romance. If you like romance, try A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't mind Throne of Glass. It has a lot of fun. Here Comes the Cavalry, but it's like, it's easy to read, but it's very just like it's of its time, young adult. Like it's very predictable in its own way. And then her newest series, I'm liking a lot, but I like it because of its romance elements, even though it technically has more world building and plot than her actual romance series.
Yeah.
But it's not why I read it. I like that she takes characters, makes them really traumatized, and makes them walk back up the mountain. Like I like that. Yeah, that one.
Blood. Okay, cool. Yeah, I used to say I hate romance in books, and then I found romance that was actually done well, and now I say, well, I like good romance.
Yeah, and it depends on what you want. Like,
yes.
I think the thing with Sarah J. Maas specifically is she's very comfortable and predictable and formulaic. Like all of her books, you pick it up and you're like, oh, this is by Sarah J. Maas. You could be given it and not told the author, just a random chapter, and you're like, this is her.
That's a compliment, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's distinctly her. She reuses character tropes, she reuses plot arcs and things, and it's honestly for me, like when I get depressed, that's really what I require. So it's nice to have an author that I'm just like, I'm feeling bad. Give.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. I think whenever someone has an authorial voice that you can recognize, like I say about Joe Abercrombie, if you put a blind and show me a and someone came in and put a piece of paper and I looked and it was a paragraph, I could tell you it was Joe Abercrombie.
We've been trying to get Alan. You guys need to help us with this. Everyone who loves Alan, we almost convinced him in real time to start a weekly read aloud of A Court of Mist and Fury. He was going to read a chapter a week, and we were going to see his real time responses. We almost had this. We need more pressure.
Could you imagine?
It would be so good.
Could you imagine? I'm trying to get him to become a DM for booktube Dungeons and Dragon D&D, but I don't think he has enough time.
No, I think he would need a different job first.
Yeah, but I think he could quit his job if he did D&D on books. It would be a huge hit. It would be massive.
Yeah,
people love it, and Alan, I can already tell you he'd be one of the best DMs ever.
He'd be great.
Yeah.
Ooh, speaking of DMing in RPGs, back to A Mask of Mirrors, which started this whole thing. The Mask of Mirrors came from two authors, Marie Brennan, who's known for A Natural History of Dragons, and I think it's Alyssa Helm. I'm unsure how to pronounce their name. But regardless, they were playing an RPG together, and Alyssa Helm was the DM, and Marie Brennan played this character, Ren, who is the main character of A Mask of Mirrors. And then they just started in writing plot arcs for their D&D campaign or RPG. It became as much work and collaboration as like a book. And so then they just like started from scratch with this world and made this book.
Well, I'm in for that because I like the last.
So it's like inspired by like real life gameplay and character interaction. And what's really interesting is like at first I didn't know, you can't tell when you read it that two authors wrote it. The authorial voice is one voice. Like
that's impressive.
Yeah, like having read a lot of Marie Brennan now, I wouldn't even say it's Marie Brennan's voice. Like it's
so Mask of Mirrors is written by two. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, M.A. Carrick is Marie, and then A is Alice. And also important to note, Alyssa Helm is non-binary. I know that gets like flubbed a lot on the internet, but yeah. So it's two authors, and what was cool to learn, because I listened to a panel with the both of them and Fonda Lee, because I'm a nerd and Orbit did a panel. And apparently some of my favorite characters are crafted by Alyssa Helm, and I need to read more of their works because I'm like, these are some of my favorite characters. Like, and the reason why they wrote it, because they make good NPCs, which is what reminded me of Alan and how he would make amazing NPCs with these, great voices and characters.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, Mask of Mirrors. I mean, you kind of have me interested. I might have to pick it up.
I mean, I forget, you've read Mistborn, but you gave it away, so I don't remember if you liked it or not.
So book one was fine. I think the story of book one is good. I didn't like the writing very much. Book two is probably my least favorite. It's Well of Ascension's in the bottom three books I've ever read for my taste. And then book three, I didn't care what happened.
Yeah. Well, I would say the things that, like the ballroom politics of Mistborn, I was reminded of while I read this, but this is even better ballroom politics because they ballroom dance. Makes me happy. I was a dancer in college, and I've never had on page written what it's like to dance with another individual. And I was like, this is amazing.
I get it. Alexander Darwin has a self-published series called The Combat Codes, and he describes jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts on page, and he does it phenomenally well, especially after all the bad hand-to-hand combat you read in books. Oh, they're so miserable. He wrote, it was a jiu-jitsu seminar. That's how good it is. And you're just like, God, this is great. So I totally understand that connection.
Yeah, so for me, like I said in that one video, The Mask of Mirrors is just like so much of like, this is all the stuff Angela likes specifically.
Yeah,
and awesome. I've just had the joy of like so many people having read it off my recommendation and really loving it, and it's just nice when people find a book.
Huh. That's I think that's one of the things that like helped grow my channel and like grew my community was like connecting with people over John Gwynn's books. And it's something that's like pretty special to me. Like I really, really appreciate his works because of that. And it was all genuine, and I've talked to John since then. And I hope no one ever conflates the fact that I've talked to John and he's been very kind to the fact that I love his book. I loved his books first before I ever talked to the dude or knew anything about it. I just loved his books and was so blown away by it. And it helped build this community up. It really did. So I can understand, especially when someone else picks it up and they love it. And it's just like, yes, it's the best.
You bring up something interesting there where I never think, I know some people really want pure objective reviews or, they want nothing to have influenced your opinion. But I think it's important if you like or don't like an author, if you have been exposed to that, it can make your experience better or worse. I think that's important. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I only loved Fondalee's Greenbone Saga and The Mask of Mirrors more after that panel, and realizing, okay, so I wasn't making this up. This is actually a thing you did intentionally, and oh my gosh, your brains are so cool, and like you're great people. So like I loved them before that, but I love them even more now.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having a different perspective on something because of information that you've been given, right?
Yeah.
Like honestly, talking to Erickson definitely made me appreciate Malazan more.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't make me not trustworthy or something like that, but like getting out of the author's mouth, like their intentions around things or how they do things, I mean, that's awesome. Being included into the process, one, it's a privilege, and then two, it can increase your experience. And while remaining level-headed and looking at things through a fair lens. But it's like if a book has quantum mechanics in it and you understand that, that's valid, that you would appreciate it more, right? So
no, and like I mean, I don't know. I don't know what an objective review is, and I know that my audience knows where I'm at when I'm talking about books, and they're used to what certain things mean to me and everything like that. Like I think Alan says it all the time. You get used to watching this person and you know what their things mean in relationship to you as a consumer.
Yep.
And it's just like, even when I do my standalone reviews, I do sometimes do this was the condition in which I read it in. Was I depressed or not? Like, I don't say it like that. It's not a checklist, but I'll be like,
right.
But like, I'll be like, I buddy read this with friends, and and like, I was really excited for it, or I had no expectations. Like I say all of that real quick at the beginning, and like that's the frame in which I consumed this work. And like, I've met Sanderson. I love Sanderson books. I am very biased when I pick up a Sanderson book. I have only good memories. So
yeah, and being able to state what your biases are important. Yeah. Like when Wins a Winner eventually gets released, I'm gonna make a video calling out everyone that said it wouldn't come out, and I'm gonna be super super petty and braggadocious, and it's gonna be hilarious. And then everyone will just move the goalpost and say, "Well, Dream of a Spring will never come out," and I'll go, here we are again. And then in 20 years, when Daniel Abraham finishes them, I'll get to do another video, and it'll be great.
My most annoying thing about the internet, for people who aren't normally like in the bookish internet, so no one who's really here hanging out with us, but I can't tell you the number of times I have been told, don't worry, when Martin dies, Sanderson will finish A Song of Ice and Fire. No, he will not.
Well, the people who say that, I'm sorry, like, and it's probably not even their fault. They just don't know. And that's fine.
No, I mean, like, if there is an author I would have slated potentially who is popular and who maybe would even want the job, I don't even know, it would be Joe Abercrombie, maybe, of popular authors. Mm-hmm. But like, you can't just assume just because he finished one dead guy's work that he's going to do it again. Yeah, and it's very different.
I think it's also like, I mean, people can talk about whatever they want, but like, I do think it's like slightly disrespectful to George to be like pondering his, like, man, that's pretty rough. Like,
yeah, no, I mean,
it's such a rough thing. But you're right. He is like something needs finished, throw him at it. It's kind of ridiculous.
Well, and he only finished Wheel of Time because it was a very inspirational series for him. It was one of his favorites as a fan, and like an inspiration as an author.
He would do a terrible job with Martin's story.
Oh gosh, I think actually one of the things I had heard Sanderson say, one of the reasons it took him so long to get published is in the 90s and early 2000s, all anyone wanted was George R.R. Martin book. Yeah. But he couldn't write those stories, and it wouldn't resonate. Evie, I think January. What am I reading? I'm reading Amore actually right now. I'm reading my romance short story collection. After that, I'm excited for Ken Liu to destroy me.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to Ken Liu as well. And The Grace of Kings is something that's climbed up my TBR, like really high.
Is it finished yet? I can't tell if it's a trilogy or a series.
So I believe, and someone in the chat can correct me because I haven't read it, but I believe it's a quartet, but book 3 just came out, and book 4, I think, is due out this year as well, though. Because that's what I said. I said, book 4, if it's not out. But someone told me that book 4 is coming out in like the next 6 months. And I'm like, well, if that's the truth, then why not? I'll just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about it, but I have read 2 Ken Liu short stories, and I loved them, so I want to read his short stories more.
Yeah.
So we will see.
Yeah, and I think Barron is correct. He said pretty sure Daniel Abraham would finish it. Yeah, that would most likely be who would finish George's work.
Talk about a series that I should start but haven't put on a list to start is his Long Price Quartet. Yeah,
that's another one, and he has a new release coming out that I'm absolutely going to be reading on day one. That'll be a read along if anyone wants to read along with me that month. Like, I'll definitely be super pumped for that new one. So
Yeah,
I'm
no.
pretty hyped up. Well, Angela, we have done almost 3 hours, and
Oh yeah.
I think we've given the people what they wanted, and that was a variety of topics and books. And I feel like I got to understand your taste a little bit better too, which is great. When we first collabed on the Hob video, I'd watched some of your videos, but that was like our first time really communicating with each other, and I've grown to really appreciate our discussions and our friendship,
Yeah.
and our booktube. I don't know. Are we coworkers? Is that how that works? I don't know.
We can go with the word friend.
Yeah, we'll go with friend. I like that more. It's a little warm and cozy. And this was good. This was like a really nice chill December Friday night. And do you got any big plans for the holidays? What are you doing?
So tomorrow we're celebrating my birthday by seeing Spider-Man. Don't you anyone spoil me in the comments right now.
Don't even read it.
And then because I love Spider-Man. I love a lot of superhero things. We didn't talk about superhero things, but I have so many superhero opinions. I love Spider-Man, and we're going to play board games. And I bought, actually, it's right next to me, this new card game that I'm going to try out with my friends called Shamans. It's supposed to be like a trick-taking social deduction game.
Yo, that looks really cool.
I'm excited about it. It was like $20, so worst case.
Yeah.
I didn't lose too much money. So that's Saturday. And then for the holidays, so I'm in Boston. My grandma lives in New Hampshire, so we're going to see her Monday, and my cousins from Maine. And then we're with my fiance's family on Christmas. So it'll be nice.
That's great. Well, I hope it's a good time. And I do appreciate you, and I also appreciate your fiance, giving up a Friday night with probably.
Honestly, this Friday was hard. I was supposed to be watching Witcher. We'll see if I can get them out of their rooms, because one of them has insomnia, so I bet I could watch an episode or two.
It's good. I liked it. I like that. I'm probably going to go watch episode 2, or I might read. I haven't decided yet, but
I don't know. I'm excited, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I love the trailer when they have the rap song with it. I thought that was so good.
Yeah, I thought it was different. It was different. It's okay to step out and try different things. I actually thought it was really good.
The scene with the table in the trailer.
Yeah, I was in. I'm all in. I like the horror vibe, so I'm like, that's just something I love. I love fantasy. Combine it, I'm probably gonna watch, and I'm probably gonna enjoy. Hey, thanks for giving me 3 hours of your time. I appreciate you. I know everyone in chat does too.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to my rambles. If I disliked one of your favorite books, I'm wrong. You're right.
That's the number one rule. That's the number one rule. Chat, thank you for being the third guest here tonight. Also, Nelzar, I saw you said Abraham has always said he won't finish. If you could leave that in a comment, like the quote in a comment down below where you found that, I'd like to see that, because if that's the case, I actually just don't think anyone's going to finish it, which George already said he doesn't want anyone to. So we probably won't.
I mean, if he says he doesn't want anyone to, I don't really even know. I mean, I guess his state's in charge. But
I don't think anyone would ever finish it, to be honest. Yeah. I don't think so. But on a more positive note, have a happy holidays, everyone. All the Chatting with Nuts listeners, thanks for being here. Everyone in the chat, I appreciate you. As you can tell, the next episode should fall on New Year's Eve. I don't think I'm going to have an episode on New Year's Eve. I think the next episode will actually probably be the third week of January because of some conflict with scheduling for me. I have Fridays are going to be a little rough. So I'll probably be back in about a month on January 21st. But I think I'm going to go live on New Year's Eve earlier in the day than usual, which all my European people are probably excited about. And it might just be like a Q&A or something, but I think I'll be doing some sort of live broadcast on New Year's Eve. It just won't be a full-blown Chatting with Nuts, or maybe it will. Just keep a look out on my Twitter and on the community tab, and we'll keep you updated there. So everyone, Angela, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks.
And
it was fun.
Yes, absolutely. We'll do it again. We certainly will. Happy holidays, everyone. Until I see you, maybe even next year, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.